On today's episode of the OneIQ Football Talk podcast, we talk about the latest and greatest free agent signings, some shocking trades, the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and where Justin Fields is going to play next season, and the retirement of one of the greatest of all time. Stay tuned for all of this and more.
Here we go! Here we go! Here we go!
We're going to have a fiery Sterling today.
Well, no, you just have a big old air horn, and anytime a Packers fan tries to talk, you just hit the button and drown them out. Like, no, I can't hear you. Go Bears.
It's basically the la 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 la.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You don't even have to live there. You can do it from here. Just remote control everything. Yeah, I'm pissed off, man. Fuck the NFL at this point.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the OneIQ Football Talk podcast, coming at you with another week. This time, free agency frenzy has been all around this week, and it has been crazy. We've had trades, we've had some surprising free agent moves, but first, Sterling, my co-host, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm good, man. You know, the weather's finally getting beautiful here, so that helps, and it's been an exciting week, you know, like I'm at work every day just on the free agency tracker, you know, checking to see what's happening, and like you said, you know, big trades drop in, surprising trades in some cases, you know, big free agents signing places we weren't necessarily expecting, and then some teams that we thought needed to make some moves just didn't really do much of anything. So it's been a unique week and makes it fun.
Yeah, I think the first thing that I want to kind of touch on about this free agency is that the Dallas Cowboys and Jerry Jones immediately, when the season was over, and said, I'm going to go all in this offseason and really just attack it and get really aggressive with the spending and just really going all out this year. And when I look at everything, they have made very little moves. They were the last team to actually make a free agent signing. Their biggest free agent signing is Trent Sieg, which is a long snapper who was just re-signed. And then other than that, it's just, you're just seeing guys leave. And I think
this is make or break year for Dallas too. Like Jerry Jones has a lot of contracts to re-sign next year. You know, he's got Dak Prescott coming up next season at the end of the year, CeeDee Lamb at the end of next year. I think DeMarcus Lawrence is the end of 2025. Like all their big names are coming up on contract in the next year or two. So this really
Micah
was
Parsons
their window.
Also.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, like this was their window to really make a push and try to get over that hump. You know, they've not done much in the playoffs in decades, really.
Well, it's always been the joke of, okay, the Dallas Cowboys are going to win the regular season, and then the second that they get to the playoffs, they're just going to instantly tail off, and it's like, we know they're going to lose in the playoffs because it's the Cowboys. Of course they're going to lose.
I saw a hilarious meme yesterday that was, Facebook was created in 2004, which means there has never been a Facebook post made about the Dallas Cowboys winning a Super Bowl, an NFC championship, or even a division game.
Yeah, well, because they've won wild card games, but that's as far as they've really ever gotten. And I think what could possibly be only described as the best comma on a tweet ever, and this was Skip Bayless and he had 4 words in this particular tweet, and it was saved. I don't even really think it was saved all that much by the comma, but it was all in, comma, my ass. Which, when I first read that, I went, okay, Skip, finally telling us something there, buddy? Like, the ratings on the show aren't doing that well, you know.
Trying to find a way to get Shannon Sharp back.
But yeah, like, when you initially just read that, it's just like, all in my ass. Just, like, I know exactly what he's talking about, where he's quoting Jerry Jones, but maybe in the tweet just have a little bit more than just all in, comma, my ass, period.
Right.
Maybe have a little bit of,
Give us some context.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Because just out of the blue, just randomly, it's not like it's quote tweeted anywhere where it's just, oh, the Dallas Cowboys haven't made a signing yet. They haven't made a move. They're the only team in the NFL not to do anything thus far. And then he goes all in, comma, my ass. So you're just like, okay, like I get that. But just tweets, he just tweets that out there just for everyone to see, and you're just like, okay, Skip.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Skip all over though. That dude does not understand context at all.
No. I'm happy. Like, that show has definitely dropped with the, when Shannon Sharp left, because no one likes Skip.
Yeah.
He's just a twat. But yeah, this off season, man, or this free agency period has just been absolutely crazy, because there have been positions and guys where you just see them get signed and you're like, wow, like I didn't expect him to go there, or damn, like this guy got that much money. Like, I knew Kirk Cousins for the Falcons was going to get paid, but what he got on his contract was 4 years, $180 million, $100 million guaranteed. He is 36 years old, coming off of a torn Achilles.
Yep.
And
I
the
know,
Falcons
that blew my mind, too.
the Falcons are like, we'll keep him till his 40s. It's like,
Right.
okay. Kirk Cousins, without a doubt, a top 10 quarterback in the NFL the last couple of years. He's shown how efficient he is. He's shown that he can be he can be a calculated and good quarterback. He's 36.
And he's only won one playoff game in his entire career. Like with this guaranteed $100 million, that puts him over career earnings beyond Tom Brady. And Tom Brady had something like 35 playoff wins to Kirk Cousins 1. And he's now going to out-earn what Tom Brady made playing football. It's just absolutely insanity.
Yeah, like, when I thought of the Falcons going after Kirk Cousins, I was like, you know what? It makes sense. It's a veteran quarterback who is playing arguably his best football. Like, before he got injured this year, he was playing his best football. Granted, he had one of the best offensive weapons in the entire game in Justin Jefferson. But, they have a ton of weapons there on the offensive side for Kirk to go after. But I figured it was going to be a 2-year deal because of his age, and going, you know what, we're going to give him like a fully guaranteed contract, kind of the same thing that he's been getting with Minnesota. And, granted, I expected it to be a $100 million contract for 2 years. I figured he was going to be getting 50-50 per those 2 seasons. But the 4 years, man, I was like, God damn.
Yeah, that's a bit of a head scratcher for Atlanta, but I don't get it. Yeah, I wasn't even expecting $50 million. I was expecting a 2-year, $90 million deal. 45, just because of that torn Achilles last year. We don't know what kind of condition Kirk Cousins is going to come out in. Like, at that age, the body doesn't heal the same way, and like, he could come out there and first drive of the game go down like Aaron Rodgers and blow it out again, and then here, have $100 million for one snap, basically. So it's a big risk for the Atlanta Falcons doing something like that, especially when you had options and opportunities to go after a guy like Justin Fields, for example. There were other options out there for them, and the fact that they went so all in on Kirk Cousins, it's a little baffling.
Yeah, and you just kind of continue to look back at that and go, if the Falcons do not really get anything here, you're really, like, let's say Kirk Cousins does go down with an injury in year 1. This is one of those moves that is franchise breaking for like years and years and years, because
it is. I don't even know who they have for a backup right now, because they traded Desmond Ridder away to the Arizona Cardinals in return for a wide receiver, and then Marcus Mariota has signed with the Commanders, and so that's, as far as I know, Kirk Cousins is the only quarterback they have on roster now.
Yeah, I would have to look that up here at the moment, but yeah, it's they are playing fast and loose with a very expensive thing, and this kind of goes back to last year, where the Falcons were one of the teams that was heavily rumored to be in the conversation for Lamar Jackson. You could have give it up 2 first-round picks for Lamar Jackson and paid him the $200 million contract that he's getting from Baltimore, and you know for a fact that he's going to be around for the entirety of that contract. I'm not saying that Kirk doesn't want to be there for those 4 years, but again, you see the best of the best sometimes make it to 40. Like you saw Tom Brady do it. I don't think you saw Peyton Manning do it. You saw Brett Favre do it. It's very, very rare that you see a quarterback get to age of 40 and still be playing competent football. Like Peyton Manning, his last year of football, he was bad. Like yeah, they won the Super Bowl, but that was because of that insanely good defense that they had, and Peyton Manning just doing just enough to get them over the hump. So this is going to be a really interesting signing for the Falcons, and they need to hope they get that right, or everyone in that building is going to be completely gone.
Yeah, and I do feel like they might not be done. We've heard all season Justin Jefferson talking about how he wants to play with Kirk. Kirk Cousins is his quarterback. That's what he wants. And so, I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility that Atlanta and Minnesota still make some kind of a deal to send Justin Jefferson down to Atlanta, and maybe someone like a Bijan Robinson or a Kyle Pitts ends up going back the other way, because they do have a lot of offensive weapons. And they could afford to part with some of those, and with Minnesota now also having 2 first-round picks, who's to say they don't scoop up another one? They don't go to Atlanta and go, well, we'll give you Justin, but we want one of your former first-round picks plus this year's first, and load themselves up with 3 and do a full reset in Minnesota.
Yeah, I don't think Atlanta is going to be a team that's going to trade for Justin Jefferson, just because they already have Drake London. They traded for Rondell Moore. They signed Darnell Mooney to a decently sizable deal. They have weapons in place to the point where they've taken themselves out of the conversation for a wide receiver to be even drafted with that 8th overall pick, because I know they were one of the teams that was kind of in that conversation.
Yeah, I definitely don't see them drafting one, but I mean, I could see Kirk Cousins going in there to, after talking with JJ and being like, look guys, let's bring him in. I know you've got other weapons here, but like, I don't need all of these guys. I need Justin Jefferson. And if you just gave him 180 million, he comes to you and says, I need this guy, you're probably gonna listen and try to get him at least, throw an offer Minnesota's way just to see. But you're right, I don't think that is likely the landing spot, because I believe this is Justin Jefferson's last year on his contract.
Yeah.
And so with Kirk being in Atlanta for 4 years, he may just, wait out the year, play some lackluster football in Minnesota, and then just move himself down there anyway.
Yeah, I think Justin Jefferson, I do think he's going to get traded this year, this offseason, because Minnesota, because you're going to have to pay an extraordinary amount. Like, this is going to be the highest contract we've ever seen from a wide receiver. I would not be surprised if you see $40 million per season for Justin Jefferson. I think that would be probably a little too much, but it wouldn't shock me, because he is that good, he is that consistent, and he has been that guy. But the question is going to be, where is he going to go? And the thing is, the Vikings aren't going to lose him for nothing. They're going to be like, okay, like, you were going to be franchise tagged until someone trades for you. And someone will. And that's a conversation that we will have probably a little bit later down the line today, and without a doubt in the future.
Likely throughout the off season, throughout the season, until it happens, basically, it will be a talking point. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I know he is that good, and he should get a big paycheck. But the problem with that is, you pay a wide receiver $40 million, you're basically going, here's all your money, but you're not getting a ring.
also depends on which situation he's going to, because, like, let's say, for instance, he signs a 3-year deal. If you have a team like the Texans who's going to have C.J. Stroud on a rookie deal for the next couple of years, why wouldn't you go out and do a move like
You
that?
might be able to get away with it.
Yeah, it's, and
It's few and far between where you have a good situation like that where you also can slot in a high-paid wide receiver. Like your Bears, for example, this year picking up Keenan Allen. That's a big contract, but he'll be off the books by the time you have to pay a quarterback or anybody else like that.
Exactly, and that's another move and situation that we will talk about here. But yeah, so a lot of big time moves. Obviously, we're going to be talking about all of these high end guys. I know personally I have about 27 guys on my list that I'm going to talk about, and we're not going to go quite in depth as the one that we did with Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins was obviously one of the guys. I know you have a few guys that you want to talk about. Chances are we have a lot of the same guys. But yeah, kind of going through each position group. But before we get that, I gotta say, man, like, the running backs this year have just been, after what happened last year of everyone kind of going, running backs aren't valued the way that they should be. Running backs are kind of walking out going, like, we know we're not going to get the money that we should, but hey, we're getting paid this offseason.
Yeah, and it seems like they've settled back and realized that they're not going to get 15 to 25 million a year. But what's nice to see is the teams are paying them their worth, and they're giving them multi-year deals. That's the big thing, is like at least these guys know that their job is secure for the next 2 to 4 years in a lot of cases. And so
a lot of 3-year deals.
Right, a lot of 3-year deals. Like, I think 1 4-year deal and some 2 years mixed in there as well. And then you've got, I think 1-1-year deal where the guy was just like, I want to stick it to my former team. I'm going to play here, and then I'm going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's Aaron Jones getting released from the Packers, and then saying, I'm going to go to a really shitty team in the Vikings just because I want to play you twice a year and show you what you're missing. You signed Josh Jacobs to a 4-year deal. The highest annual, or the highest value for a running back this off, or the highest deal, 4 years, $48 million, so $12 million annually. Saquon Barkley has a 3-year deal, $37.75 million, so he's making $12.5 million a year. So Barkley is getting the most per year, but not necessarily the most per the contract. But yeah, we knew Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, and Derrick Henry were going to kind of be the big 3 guys. Then we kind of knew DeAndre Swift was going to kind of be one of those guys that's also going to be kind of after that. And Tony Pollard and DeAndre Swift signed the exact same deal, which I thought was pretty funny. Both getting around that $8 million per season, which I think is great value for a good running back, because both of those guys are good running backs. They're young. I think DeAndre Swift's a little bit better. That might be me just being a little bit of bias from him being with the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, he did get a little bit more too. He's getting $8 million a season. Pollard's getting $7 million.
Yeah.
So,
and
that fits, that tracks for sure. And then, as you mentioned, Derrick Henry signed with the Baltimore Ravens, which I remember saying way back at the trade deadline, if he didn't get traded there,
he's going to sign there.
He was going to be signing there, and that's exactly what happened. Much to my dismay. I don't want to have to play Derrick Henry twice a year. I'm just glad it's aged and, injured over a few seasons, Derrick Henry, and not in his prime, fully healthy Derrick Henry. Thank God for that.
I think he's still going to be terrifying in that offense. Like, him and Lamar. Like, there was a reason why so many of us were like, if you put Derrick Henry in that offense with Lamar Jackson, like, what are you going to do? Like, because you can have both of those guys on an option play where it's like, okay, we're just going to run to the right. Lamar's going to hold the ball. If he sees an opening, he's just going to go. If it's going to be a little too much, he's just going to go, here, Derek, pitch this out to you, buddy. Go. Like,
they've got to get something going with that offensive line in Baltimore, though, because, the big issue there last season was 3 separate running backs went down to injuries.
Yeah.
And Derrick Henry, he's not that beast that he was 5-6 years ago. He's dealt with some injuries, and I could see him going down relatively quickly again if he doesn't have proper protection running that ball.
Yeah, and, obviously you don't ever want to try to speculate on injuries or any sort of thing like that, but it's something that's definitely going to need to be talked about. Obviously, injury history, and, you don't like to speculate on what's happening there, but there were so many injury issues last year, but it's going to be, like, I know you're a Steelers fan, like, even you got to be excited to watch what those two guys are going to be able to do. Maybe not necessarily against your Steelers, but like against.
Well, I'm excited for those Ravens Steelers games though, because I mean, we've got Derrick Henry now that we're gonna have to find a way to stop, and the run defense for Pittsburgh has not been great. However, we made some additions that are likely going to be looking to have an impact on the Ravens specifically, and so it's gonna be fun watching that AFC North battle this year, especially.
Yeah, and one of the things that I noticed so much about this free agency period is that the NFC North has a lot of players going from team in staying inside the division. It's funny because we'll talk about more of those guys. The only other quarterback that I want to talk about that moved was Gardner Minshew to the Raiders. He got the second highest deal throughout this entire thing. Nothing too crazy. 2-year deal, $25 million a season. So it's kind of funny that that's the second best free agent move deal that we saw throughout this. Obviously, Baker Mayfield got paid, but he got paid by Tampa Bay. We're just talking about players that went from one team and moved over to another. But yeah, it's really, really interesting to see kind of what the Raiders are going to do, because I look at Gardner Minshew and I go, I think he's a starting caliber guy, but he's one of those starting caliber guys where you're looking at going, he is our last resort if we don't have anyone, but if we can get someone else, either a rookie or trade partner for a young guy, you're going to take that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think Gardner Minshew has earned himself a chance. Through his days in Jacksonville and then last year in Indianapolis, he showed he has that ability, and the Raiders are a good team for his personality and his style. I think it's going to be a really good fit. I kind of look at him as like that journeyman fringe starter, kind of like
he's today's Ryan Fitzpatrick. Yeah,
exactly. He's current day Fitzy. So that's I think
just a little bit more homeless.
A little bit, yeah. But we'll see what the Raiders do. Like you said, they may go after a quarterback in the draft. There's still one or two out there in both free agency and on the trade block that they may decide to try and go after. So we'll see where they land come week 1 preseason and what they've got in the locker room.
But yeah, pretty much the big moves in the running back department. Josh Jacobs goes to the Packers. Saquon Barkley leaves the Giants and goes to rival Philadelphia Eagles. That's a big-time move. DeAndre Swift leaving the Eagles to go to Chicago. Tony Pollard leaving the Cowboys to go to the Titans. And then obviously Derrick Henry goes to the Ravens. Those are kind of the main big-time moves. Obviously Aaron Jones got released after or just before the Josh Jacobs deal was ultimately done, and I mean, yeah.
Two other big ones I saw was Austin Eckler signing with the Washington Commanders. I know he's had some injury issues in the past, but we've seen how explosive and how much of a difference maker he can be on the field. And so I think that is a good signing from them. That's definitely an upgrade. They let Antonio Gibson go and brought in Austin Eckler. That is an upgrade in my opinion. And then Zach Moss,
signing with Cincinnati
Bengals. Since he's now for sure behind Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis, he's like, man, I made a name for myself. I deserve this. And I think that was a good move by the Cincinnati Bengals. It brings Zach Moss in. They traded Joe Mixon away for a 7th round pick just to get him out. And I think that's a good pickup for the Cincinnati Bengals.
When it comes to free agent running backs, there's really only one guy that I'm looking at right now, and I'm curious to see where he's going to go, and that's going to be Kareem Hunt. Obviously, was a free agent up until Nick Chubb went down last year and then re-signed back with Cleveland. I still think Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt is a very serviceable running back. If you put him into a rotation of guys, he's going to be very, very good. So I am curious to see where he's going to go. I don't know if you have any running backs that you're particularly looking at this moment. Most of the key main guys have been signed up. Obviously, Joe Mixon got traded to the Texans and then signed an extension there. So,
yeah, and we're kind of at that point now where the bulk of the big signings have happened, and so my focus is shifting a little bit more from where everybody is going to go to who's going to come to my team. And at that running back position, I don't see a lot of need for my team unless they decide to try and package like a Jalen Warren somewhere else, and then we would have to fill that void at some point.
Now taking a look here at the wide receiver position. Again, this wide receiver free agency class, not necessarily looked at as very touted. No one you really looked at went, this is going to be a difference maker. The top guy, Calvin Ridley, and he got paid like the top guy going from Jacksonville to Tennessee. 4 years, $92 million per season, or not per season, over those 4 years, $23 million per season. What a joy that would be for a 4-year deal, $92 million a season.
Right.
But Calvin Ridley, 29 years old, going into next season. He was just shy of 1,000 yards this past season, so he kind of proved that he still had it in that Jacksonville Jaguars offense. He's going to be the only guy on that Tennessee offense, though. But he got paid, and we'll see what is going to be the situation there. But this just felt like this was 100% who's going to give me the best option for money, and I'm going to end my career, just scooping up that money and hopefully him staying out of the casinos.
Yeah, I think that's what it came down to. Is he was like, who's going to offer me the most, or which Super Bowl contender is going to bring me in with a legitimate shot at least a number 2 spot. And I just don't think he had the offers for any of those contenders, so he went, okay, who wants to give me the most? And it was the Titans. And yeah, I think if Trevor Lawrence hadn't had the injury issues last year, we would have seen him eclipse that 1,000-yard mark.
I agree. So in essence, he was a 1,000-yard receiver yet again.
He's very much taking a downgrade at that quarterback position. His options are going to be Will Levis and Mason Rudolph at this point in time. Who knows what else Tennessee does? They need a good draft this year. They need to do something in the draft and bring in some pieces to fill out that offense a little better.
Yeah, I will say this about the Tennessee Titans. They have been making money moves this offseason. In the 27 guys that I have listed here, they signed 4 key guys that they have brought in this offseason, and they have signed even more than just those key guys. It's just out of the list that I had sent you, these were 4 guys out of my top 100 that were really, really big additions that they went after. So they looked at this offseason and they said, we are going to bring in a handful of players, and obviously Calvin Ridley is going to be the main guy. They're hoping Will Levis is going to be their quarterback of the future. Granted, I think he was actually benched at one point last year, but he had some pretty decent play at some points. It's going to be really interesting, man. But some of the other big wide receiver, Darnell Mooney and Gabe Davis, both signed the exact same deal, 3 years, $39 million per season. Darnell Mooney, the former Chicago Bear, got a little bit more fully guaranteed money with 26 as opposed to Gabe Davis, 24. Mooney goes to Atlanta, and Gabe Davis goes from Buffalo to Jacksonville.
Basically, so he's replacing Calvin Ridley after he left. So
yeah, and then Curtis Samuels goes from Washington to Buffalo to essentially replace Gabe Davis, but just going for a $24 million deal over 3 years. But yeah, there's again this free agent class for wide receivers. You're not really looking at any of them going, this is just stellar players. Like, again, look at Calvin Ridley. He's going, I'm chasing the money. Darnell Mooney, at one point, I know I was talking about him potentially fighting to be a top 15 wide receiver in the league. Last 2 years, hasn't shown that. I think he's going to be a really decent number 3 wide receiver for Atlanta. Obviously, Drake London is also there, so that's really good. Rondell Moore comes in, so it's going to be a stable of good young receivers into that offense. Gabe Davis is one of the most interesting players out there because he's going to be 25 going into next season. And there are some times where you look at Gabe Davis and go, wow, this dude just puts up electric numbers. And then there will be weeks where it's like, I got 1 catch for 8 yards. And you're like, what the hell? So I don't know if that was just that Buffalo offense. That was just one of those things where he was just so up and down. I hope that he gets, more in that Jacksonville offense, but I just don't know.
Yeah, that's the tough thing, because in Buffalo he was very streaky. He would have a really good week and then nothing. But you do got to remember, they had Cook and Diggs and Kincaid that were all also contributing on that team, and so it almost felt like it was, 1 week this guy's going to get the targets, next week this guy, and so it felt like that's the way Buffalo was kind of doing it, and it was starting to frustrate a lot of the players. So I really did expect to see at least one of those guys leave the team, if not more, just to try and find somewhere to solidify themselves as a number 1.
But we are also... Or go ahead.
Yeah, Jacksonville wasn't done with just Gabe Davis. They also brought in Devin Duvernay. They really are looking to add as many offensive weapons as they can for Trevor Lawrence at this point. I know Duvernay is not explosive, big, special, but that is a serviceable, good blocking third wide receiver in Devin Duvernay, and so that will be a good addition to the running game as well as their passing game.
I look at Devin Duvernay and go, this is one of those guys where he is a return specialist. He's being paid like a return specialist with the option to go out there and be like a 4th or a 5th wide receiver. It's pretty much like we know that you are electric with the ball in your hand in the terms of the punt and kick return, but you can also do some things in terms of, getting the ball when you're a receiver. So, yeah, Jacksonville, again, pretty much just said, this is Trevor Lawrence's final year of his deal. For the love of God, please be the generational talent that we thought we drafted. But yeah, a lot of interesting moves here. Marquise Brown goes to KC, so that's a big-time move. I know a lot of people were joking that they showed this one play of where he did drop the ball this season, and it's like, oh, yeah, he's going to fit in perfectly with the Chiefs. Do you want to know what his drop rate is over his entire career? 3.7%.
But with the Chiefs, you got to make that joke with how many drops they had and how bad, especially Kadarius Toney was. I don't think it mattered which wide receiver signed there. Somebody was going to find a clip of them dropping the ball and go, oh, he's going to fit in great.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just one of those things where you're just like, man, like, he doesn't drop the ball, guys. Like, it's 3.7%. And last year, I think he had like, no, I think it's over his career, he has like 3.2%, and last year he had a 3.7, so it's essentially no difference. If you throw him 100 balls, he's going to drop 3 of them, essentially, is what that stat is coming out to. But, yeah, obviously, the feeling with KC is they're going to draft a wide receiver, go Rashid Rice, and then, obviously, Marquise Brown, who is a burner. Like, he could be Tyreek level with this team with just his jets. And then Xavier Worthy, how fun would that be just to see that track meet go say, we got Tyreek Hill 2.0. But, yeah, some interesting situations with the wide receivers. Just taking a look here at some of the guys that I could potentially see. Mike Williams, obviously, was released by the Chargers. He's a big body wide receiver who is very good at the 50-50 balls and is a crisp route runner. Injury issues. Then we also have Hunter Renfrow, who was released by the Raiders. This is one of those guys. He is a slot player and nothing more than that, but he can be very effective out of the slot. And at least last year, I'm not sure about the year prior to, really just wasn't utilized in the offense, and so it was a pretty easy move for them to move on from him. But those are pretty much the only 2 wide receivers that are still available that I'm kind of looking at. Obviously, you have Odell Beckham, Michael Gallup, Tyler Boyd, Michael Thomas, all kind of out there, but All of those guys are fairly old, and it's kind of like, okay, they're gonna sign like a 1-year deal just to kind of be that final guy to kind of figure stuff out. But other than that, not really anything crazy. Taking a look here at some of the tight ends that have been signed, I want to talk about this because the top 3 guys to get contracts this offseason were all Seattle Seahawks tight ends. Colby Parkinson, 25 years old, went from Seattle to the Rams, 3 years, $22.5 million. Noah Fant, also with the Seattle Seahawks, re-signs with Seattle, but he signs a 2-year deal, $21 million total, so he's making about $10.5 million per season, so a little bit better value than Parkinson. And then Will Dissly, also with the Seattle Seahawks, he goes to the Chargers, so they're all staying West Coast, and he signs a 3-year, $14 million deal. So Seattle last year was basically just a tight end factory.
Yep.
And those boys all got paid, but Noah Fant remaining with the Seattle Seahawks. He was one of the guys that I actually thought was potentially going to be a Chicago Bear this offseason, but they ended up getting Gerald Everett on a 2-year, $12 million deal. I think that's amazing value for him and the team. But yeah, other than that, a lot of the tight ends, it was pretty much going to be those 4 guys that were really going to be talked about. Johnny Smith signed prior to. You still have Logan Thomas, Hayden Hurst kind of out there, but none of those guys are really going to be your tight end 1. And even you look at Gerald Everett, he's not going to be a tight end 1 in Chicago. He's going to be tight end 2 behind Cole Kmet. Colby Parkinson, Noah Fant, both are going to be starters. Will Dissly probably going to be a starter for the Rams as well, or for the Chargers, pardon me, kind of replacing Gerald Everett. But yeah, other than those 3 guys, it's not really going to see anybody really be a starter tight end. Maybe Jonnu Smith with the Dolphins,
and maybe Mike Gesicki with the Bengals. They've got sort of youthful tight ends, so he'll compete with those young guys and try to push them to be better than him. But if they don't step up, then I could see Gesicki ending up as the tight end 1 in Cincinnati if those guys don't show any promise.
Yeah. Now moving over to the offensive line and starting out with the tackles. This tackle group, obviously headlined by Tyron Smith, not re-signing with the Dallas Cowboys, and he ends up signing with the New York Jets to help protect the blind side for Aaron Rodgers. He signs a 1-year, $6.5 million contract, so good value for one of the best tackles to play the game on a team that really needs some tackle help and just offensive line help in general. Jonah Williams, the former Cincinnati Bengal top pick, he goes from Cincinnati to the Arizona Cardinals on a 2-year, $30 million deal, so $15 million per season. So some pretty decent value right there. And then kind of looking at the rest of it, David Bakhtiari is pretty much... It's David Bakhtiari and Trenton Brown are the only 2 guys you're really looking at going, like, where could they possibly go? David Bakhtiari, I know, is a potential free agent signing for the Jets as well. So bringing in some of those 2 big end guys, but he is 32 and has not been able to finish the season in what feels like the last 4 or 5 years. And then Trenton Brown, obviously, former New England Patriot, left the Raiders the first time that he went into free agency, got paid massively. Then, I think it was like the next season he got traded back to the Patriots. So you're going to be kind of interested to see where he goes. Does he re-sign back with New England? Who knows? But yeah, those are really the tackles. I don't know if you have any tackle that you want to talk about.
Not really, no. I mean, it wasn't really anything big and flashy. I've got obviously former Steelers on my list for all of these. Chukwuma Okorafor. I didn't expect him to get a deal right away, but he did end up signing with the Patriots, 1 year, $4 million. So he'll likely be fighting for a starting role and more likely be a backup.
The biggest thing that I've seen from the offensive line standpoint is the guards, man. Oh my goodness. Robert Hunt, 5 years, $100 million, with the Carolina Panthers, just getting paid. And then the Panthers weren't done signing guards. They went out there and got Damian Lewis from Seattle, 4 years, $53 million. And then Mike Iwanu re-signs with the Patriots, $57 million over 3 years. Iwanu, definitely one of those players that's guard, tackle, kind of, wherever they really see fit. And Jonah Jackson got a 3-year, $51 million going from Detroit to the Rams. And then there was a handful of other deals. The next big one was John Reiner going from Green Bay to the Giants to help kind of protect there. But other than that, no big-time money deal. But, man, the Panthers are really walking out and saying, we're going to give our tiny quarterback a lot of protection up front, and they are spending $153 million on 2 guards.
Yeah. I mean, it's key for them. Like the Panthers, obviously, after last year, they drafted their number 1 guy, the guy they thought was going to be their future, and they fell flat on their face. And so they had to go in and make some changes on the offense through and through. And so that didn't surprise me. Get a couple of good guards in there, help protect Bryce Young, and potentially open up some holes for whatever running game they end up having as well. It was very important for them to shore up that offensive line.
Yeah, and I like the Robert Hunt move for sure. I was a little shocked at the Damian Lewis move, just because I truly believe when you have a young quarterback, you want to try to surround him with good talent up front on the offensive line, but you also want to have that be cheap as well, because, for instance, over these next 5 years, you're paying, you're essentially paying $34 million a season for 2 offensive linemen. Granted, there are some offensive linemen that I'm sure are making damn near close to that, just being that individual player. But for a young team, and a quarterback on a rookie deal, it's fine. But you just really got to hope that these 2 guys, by the time these contracts start to come to the end, you're not just looking at it going, well, you just hope for both of them that you're not looking at it a season or 2 down the line going, oh no, we screwed up. Because those are big moves. Again, you like it because you want to add protection for Bryce Young, and they don't really have the draft capital to do that. But they are making some investments there for sure.
They do, and this does create that little bit of a gap where they can go, okay, we're sort of set here for a couple years until we do have that draft capital again to start bringing some youth in to fill in these positions and learn and grow. So I do like those moves. I think those were smart signings.
Without a doubt. I can't really argue with the moves going, you have a young quarterback that you need to protect, and you're going to go out there and do it. So it's hard to disagree with those moves, but it's one of those things of going, okay, we know what the Carolina Panthers have been like the last few years, and their decision-making going, you're spending almost $35 million on 2 players. You better be damn sure that these are good players.
Exactly, and that's on 2 guards. Usually you see that that $100 million contract more for the left tackle than for the left guard. But I mean, there weren't a lot of big name tackles out there, so they had to sort of pick and choose and make their moves where they could.
Yeah, like you gotta buy where you can. But now taking a look here at the center position, Lloyd Cushenberry, the biggest center free agent so far. The 4 years, $50 million contract goes from Denver to Tennessee. So Tennessee was one of those teams that desperately needed offensive line help, and they got the best center in free agency. Tyler Badaz goes from Dallas to Washington, so a nice little bit of in-division rivalry there. Gets 3 years, just shy under $30 million. So Washington, another team that also needs that offensive line help, gets a good-looking center for whoever their quarterback is going to be, whether that's Drake May or Jaden Daniels, because obviously it's no longer Sam Howell, so we kind of know that they are going to be drafting a quarterback at this point. And then a handful of other guys signed some deals. Aaron Brewer, Nick Algoretti. Algoretti more of a guard than a center, but he's versatile. He signs with Washington, kind of help shoring up the interior there. But yeah, I'm really interested to see where Connor Williams goes, man. Because if Connor Williams was healthy and didn't have that season-ending ACL tear, he would have been the top available center, in my opinion. But that ACL tear is going to be something that scares a lot of teams away.
Oh, 100%. And you know, I was watching this position closely because it is a desperate position of need for my team. And it was a bit of a gut-wrenching one seeing Mitch Morse sign with the Jacksonville Jaguars, 2 years, $10.5 million, especially at that price, because I was like, man, I feel like the Steelers would have paid him more to bring him into Pittsburgh since we so desperately need that position especially. And so that was a bit of a heartbreaker for me, because I was really hoping we were going to be able to land one of the mid to top level centers for not too much money.
And it is one of those things with centers, you can sign a 30-year-old or a 31-year-old center and sign him to a decent deal and go, you know what, he's going to be good, because center is kind of one of those positions where you can see guys get up to that 35 and still be productive. Not really much after that, with the exception of one Jason Kelsey, but even then, he decided to retire this year. But center is one of those positions where in their 30s, you can look at that and go, yeah, we feel comfortable.
Yep. Oh, 100%. As long as there's no injury history problems that they've got on the books, then yeah, it's one of the better aged positions for sure.
Yeah. Taking a look now at the edge rushing class, and this was kind of one of those weird classes where there was a couple of really good looking guys, but there was also not much after that. Pretty much the top three guys were Jonathan Greenard, Bryce Huff, and Danielle Hunter, and all three of those guys are now moving teams. Jonathan Greenard, the 27-year-old, goes from Houston to Minnesota, which was a little bit of a shocking move for me, I gotta say, because, you know, Minnesota, obviously, they could have potentially tried to re-sign Danielle Hunter. Obviously, Hunter, older, vastly more productive than Greenard. Greenard essentially coming off of 1 year of good production this season, but he had Will Anderson on the opposite side of him. Going to be 27 years old, 4 years, $76 million, so it's going to be interesting to see.
100%. And then Danielle Hunter, with that signing, he decided to flop to the other side, and he signed with the Texans himself. You know, and so they just sort of swapped positions there, and he got a decent deal as well, 2 years, $49 million.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that is going to be a scary duo with Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, because Will Anderson, granted, he didn't necessarily have the numbers that you would like from the top edge rusher and kind of being talked about, but my goodness, was he effective in the run game. Like, he showed that he was the defensive rookie of the year for a damn good reason.
Yep.
And having Danielle Hunter on the opposite side, because most people were looking at this going, okay, if they ended up re-signing Jonathan Greenard, then, you know, it's definitely going to be more people are going to focus on Will Anderson in the double teams and this stuff. But now you're looking at this going, Hunter and Anderson, who do you double team? Because if you double team Hunter, well, guess what? Will Anderson from the opposite side is going to come over. And if you double team Anderson, like, this is a scary, scary edge rushing tandem for the Texans, and it is going to be so much fun to watch.
Yeah, this defense definitely, you know, the Texans won this swap of free agents for sure. You know, not to take away from Jonathan Greenard, he did have a good year last year, but as you said, is that because he was playing opposite of Will Anderson? And what's he going to do in Minnesota when he doesn't have that big beast on the other side to take some of that attention away from him?
Yeah, so Jonathan Greenard, the 4 seasons that he has played, he has 23 total sacks. In 2020, he had 1. 2021, he had 8. In 2022, obviously, he was dealing with some injuries, had 1.5. And then this year, he had 12.5. So for him, it's just a lot of kind of roller coaster. So you're hoping that potentially this year for the Vikings are hoping, at least, that it's not necessarily just that 1 year and it's just going to be up and down. With Hunter, you know what he is. You know what you're getting out of him. He's been one of the most productive edge rushers pretty much since he came into the NFL. And so that's going to be so much fun to watch. But obviously Bryce Huff was one of the top talked about edge rushers coming into this particular class, going from the Jets to Philadelphia. Again, Howie Roseman, he just looks at that and goes, we are going to have the trenches just build up. And over the last 2 seasons, Bryce Huff has had, he's either been in the top 3 or he's been the top pass rusher in terms of pass rush efficiency. Philadelphia, they're going to get a really, really strong player. 3 years, $51 million per season, so $17 million a season, or $51 million contract, $17 million per season for a guy that, you know, has really shown that he's only been much of a rotational guy that has been very successful at getting after the quarterback. But boy, when he does get out there for passing situations, he has been money. And the biggest thing with Philadelphia is it's not just going to be Bryce Huff, so they can continue to use him in a rotation, which is going to be really good. 10 sacks last year, leading the Jets, so it's going to be really interesting to see what Philadelphia does with him.
Oh, 100%, yeah. I mean, Philadelphia, it's every year they've got all this talent, and they keep falling short. So you always wonder if this edition is going to be the one that gets them over that hump, or which one's going to do it. And so it's, I look at this and I go, okay, well, let's see what they can do.
Yeah. And when it comes to the free agents still available, Chase Young, man, 24 years old, obviously got traded to San Francisco from the Commanders, and I'm really interested to see what his value is going to be, because I think he initially walked into free agency and thought he was going to be one of the top paid guys. Then everyone kind of went, no, thank you. And so I'm wondering if he is kind of sitting out going, I'm waiting for someone to try to properly pay my value. I'm intrigued to see where this 24-year-old is going to go, because if we remember, just when he came out his first year, he looked like he was going to be one of the best edge rushers in the entire NFL for years and years and years to come. Year 2 and 3 dealt with injuries. I think year number 4, he was just kind of sick of playing in Washington. And you saw Chase Young in the playoffs for San Francisco be a pretty good edge rusher. Like him in the Super Bowl, he was very good in the Super Bowl. Like, he played very, very well against that Kansas City Chiefs team. And I think in the right system and the right situation, Chase Young could, without a doubt, potentially get back to that top edge rusher level. It's just which team is ultimately going to give him that opportunity.
Well, and that's just it. He's going to have to accept the fact that I don't think he's going to get paid what he feels he's worth. You know, he's a former number 2 overall pick, so he feels as though he should be top paid, but he didn't live up to expectations after that year 1. You know, whether it was in Washington or even last year in San Francisco after the trade, because, yeah, he looked good in the Super Bowl, but up to that point, he had good weeks, and he had weeks where you kind of forgot that he was even on the 49ers team. And so I expect he's not going to get a long term. I think he's likely going to see himself have to resign to a 1-year deal, a prove yourself sort of deal. There's some teams out there that, you know, need a number 1 guy at that pass rushing defensive end, and there's other teams that could use him in a rotational situation. It sort of just depends where he wants to play and whether he's willing to take that step back.
Yeah, for me, I kind of look at him and I go, I would like to see Chicago potentially take a bid on him and say, we're going to give you $1 million. We're going to give you a 1-year deal, $10 million. You're going to play opposite of Montez Sweat, and if Yeah, but
Yep.
the Chicago needs
They
a
know
number
each
two
other.
edge. They do. They know how to
Exactly.
work well together. And but the only problem there is that if Chase Young wants to play alongside Montez Sweat again, that's going to be the only thing.
Yeah.
But I kind of look at that and I go, Chicago has their number one edge rusher. If you can come in and prove that you're that guy, why not come to Chicago and try to get that on a 1 year prove it deal worth $10 million? I think that would be a pretty good value for him and say,
Yeah.
listen, like this is your last shot. You're going to go into a defense that is stacked. Pretty much the only thing that they're looking for is that number two edge rusher and maybe an additional defensive tackle, which is the next position that we're going to talk about. But it's going to be like, if you can't succeed in this defense with a defensive minded head coach that loves to get those guys and a defensive coordinator that his specialty is the edge rushers and getting after the quarterback, then man, like I don't know what you're going to do in the NFL. And I'm really interested to see how that's going to continue on and where he's going to go, because again, he's 24.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly the reason why I look at my Pittsburgh Steelers as well. Mike Tomlin has always wanted Chase Young. From that year of his draft, he wanted him on that Steelers team. And you talk about stacked defenses. Yeah, you're not going to be the number one or even the number two edge rusher in Pittsburgh, but you're definitely going to take some of that pressure off of both Watt and Highsmith and allow them to rotate you in more often and go, okay, well, maybe now we can help TJ Watt stay healthy as he is getting older.
Instead of
You know,
having
and
TJ Watt play every single down, it's going to be, okay, you're going
Exactly.
to play 70% instead of the
Exactly.
100. Yeah. That would be
but
terrifying.
That would be another situation of it's like, okay, we're giving you a 1 year deal. We're going to pay you 8 to 10 million a year for that 1 year. And, you know, if you do well enough, you may earn yourself a contract somewhere else in this league, you know, or you may enjoy your time here so much that you go, you know what, I want to stay here in this phenomenal defense and try to win a championship.
Yeah, it is going to be insanely interesting to see where he is ultimately going to sign, because he is such an intriguing player, because he has the potential to be one of the very best edge rushers. It's just kind of in his head right now. Can he get that unlocked again?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the teams I looked at that's kind of desperate for that defensive end edge rusher position
Washington
is
Commanders?
Baltimore Ravens. No, the Ravens. They need somebody on that D line that is a good edge rusher. They only have, I believe, one in their locker room right now for that defensive end position.
Yeah.
And so that would be a really good spot to go. He wouldn't have to be the be all guy there. You know, you got Roquan Smith, you got Kyle Hamilton, you got a lot of talent on that defense already.
Meta
And so
Bouquet,
you're
who
gonna
just signed a big time deal from the D tackle spot as well.
Exactly. And so that was another spot I looked at that I could potentially see him land.
So talking about the defensive tackles, there was one player that entered free agency. Christian Wilkins was without a doubt the best player to touch the free agent market this year. 28 years old, just such an amazingly fun defensive tackle to watch. Comes from Clemson, where he played university. Signs a $110 million deal over the course of 4 years with the Las Vegas Raiders. My God, that defensive line is going to look terrifying, because Christian Wilkins, he's a do-it-all defensive tackle where he can rush the passer, he can fill up gaps to stop the run. He is... Max Crosby found a playmate. Oh my God.
Yeah, you know he was grinning ear to ear when he heard that news that Christian Wilkins was coming, because he's like, oh, I don't have to do it all in the front seven anymore. So yeah, that was big for Max Crosby, and big for the Raiders to be able to convince Max Crosby to be happy staying in Vegas. You know, because we know near the end of last year he was starting to feel that frustration. He was starting to feel that just, he was upset. Like he felt like he had to do everything himself, and now he's not going to have to do that anymore. And that is a big big addition for the Raiders on defense.
I think this is also a really big addition for Tyree Wilson, their first round pick from last year, the edge rusher. Like Tyree Wilson, I said he's going to take a couple years to really get the swing of things in the NFL, and then it's going to be Tyree Wilson and Max Crosby coming off the edge together, and that's going to be terrifying. But adding Christian Wilkins, it's going to be like he can kind of be the forgotten stepchild almost on that defense, and he's going to end the year with like 10.5 sacks, and people are going to go like, holy shit, Tyree Wilson had double-digit sacks this year, and no one talked about it because it's like, okay, well, Max Crosby's going to get like 15, and then Christian Wilkins from the D tackle spot's going to get 10, and it's going to be, oh my, like, this was such a good move for the Raiders.
Oh, 100%. Because now, you know, as we were talking about with the Texans and who do you double team, that it's going to be the same thing. You know, do you double team Wilkins or do you double team Crosby? You know, whichever one you leave one-on-one is going to bust through that line and put pressure on your quarterback for sure.
And the crazy thing is that I think most offenses are going to look at and go, we're going to double team Max Crosby every single play. We're going to deal with Wilkins as best as we can, but we can't allow Mad Max to get after our quarterback. But my God, like they're going to leave Wilkins on an island, which is going to be a mistake. But
yeah, Wilkins is one of those special D tackles where he can take on two guys and still beat you.
Yeah, he's a top 5 defensive
you leave
tackle
him
in the
one-on-one
NFL.
with your center or with one of your guards, he's going to make them look foolish probably 70% of the time.
Yeah. Such a great move by this team. Then taking a look at some of the other defensive tackles, it severely drops off from that 4-year, $100 million contract to Grover Stewart re-signing with Indianapolis, 3 years, $39 million. And then Justin Jones, the Chicago Bears defensive tackle, who really didn't play that great this year, gets a 3-year, $31 million deal with the Cardinals. I'm happy for Justin Jones. I would have liked him to stay with the Bears as kind of that, you know, rotational backup guy. But the Cardinals clearly looked at him and said, we're going to give him $10 million a year. And I went, good for you, Justin. Proud of you, buddy. No way were we going to pay that. But then pretty much every single deal after that is pretty light. Sheldon Rankins signs a 2-year deal with Cincinnati for $24.5 million. But yeah, then it just really, really falls off. I think an interesting move was Javon Kinlaw going from San Francisco to the Jets on a 1-year deal. Kinlaw was a guy that they drafted to replace DeForest Buckner with that team, and now he's gone, former first-round pick. And then kind of everyone else here at the moment, there's not really any guy that you're really looking at. Fletcher Cox announced his retirement. We'll talk about Aaron Donald here in a little bit about his retirement, but yeah, now moving over to the linebackers here. Obviously, the biggest linebacker, 25-year-old Patrick Queen, goes from Baltimore to Pittsburgh. Floor is yours.
Yeah, that was my happiest moment this week, because I was saying it the whole lead up to free agency. I was like, Patrick Queen is the guy we got to go after. Taking him away from Baltimore, you know, getting that bit of a mental edge over the Ravens. And I was worried because there were other teams that were really pushing for him. I know Miami was offering him longer than that 3-year deal that he ended up getting. You know, there were a couple other teams out there that were really pushing for him. But I think ultimately he kind of felt like he had been slighted by the Ravens and wanted a way to sort of show them what they made a mistake on. You know,
he said in his press conference he wants to be a villain. What you just sit back and go, oh.
He's ready to enter his villain arc. Yeah. And especially with Derrick Henry signing on the other side, I cannot wait for Derrick Henry and Patrick Queen to meet like in a gap somewhere in that first game together. Oh, it's going to be so much fun. Can't wait to hear that smash.
And you are going to hear that smash because Patrick Queen is not going to back down. I still think Derrick Henry is going to win that matchup, even with his age, because it's Derrick Henry. But it is going to be fun, to say the least, man. It is.
Yeah, and this is huge for the Steelers. Like this, we finally have a
Like, this is
potential.
your guy. This is
Yeah,
this is the
since
guy.
Ryan Shazier had his injury, we've never really had the guy. You know, we thought maybe Devin Bush when we drafted him, and he had some injuries and was never the same. You know, we brought in like 4 guys last year: Quan Alexander, Landon Roberts, and they were serviceable. They definitely helped the run game, that run defense improve, but they all dealt with injuries. Patrick Queen is young, he's healthy, he's shown the ability to stop the run. He's shown that he can rush the quarterback if needed, but most importantly for him, he can drop into a zone cover quarterback spy, which in the AFC North, you've got Lamar Jackson, you've got Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow, all these guys that you need to be able to keep an eye on the quarterback and protect the middle of the field. And I think Patrick Queen is a key piece in doing that. This also allows the Steelers to open up in the draft and go, okay, now we don't have to draft 2 middle linebackers. We can just draft 1 to play alongside Patrick Queen, and we can spread out our draft picks in other areas.
I think one of the things that you also forgot to mention that I think is even more important for the Steelers is he has never missed a game. In his rookie
Well, that's
season,
what I mean
he
with
played
the health.
Yep, he played all 16 games, and then the last 3 years he's played all 17 games. The best availability is availability.
Yeah.
And or I forget the phrase. It's the best way to get paid is availability. It's whatever the phrase is. But yeah, the dude is an absolute monster. And I know, like last week when we were talking, this was one of those guys that you were definitely looking at going, if we can get this, it's going to be big. And I agreed. I thought this was going to be a top. But neither of us thought that Patrick Queen was actually going to sign with the Steelers, just because we didn't think that he could get the contract that he would have wanted to. And the 3 years, $41 million, that is amazing value.
They backloaded it as well. So he's not making as much of this first year. And then year 2 and 3, he'll be making more. And by the end of this contract, TJ Watt will be in his 30s.
Yes.
And so we'll be looking at that going, is TJ Watt going to stay there? And that's a lot of money off the books then, where if Patrick Queen produces here, he can come back after this 3-year deal. He'll be 27, and they'll be able to go, okay, well, here's a 4-year deal, and you're getting paid now. And that is going to be a big thing for Patrick Queen, I think, going forward. But you look at this Steelers defense now. You got Fitzpatrick, Joey Porter Jr., TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, who admittedly is older, but still a dominant presence on that D-line. And then you add Patrick Queen into that. This is going to be a scary defense for teams to play against next year if they can stay healthy. That was the issue this past season, was health. Fitzpatrick dealt with injuries, Hayward, Watt, Highsmith, all of them essentially missed weeks due to injury. And so that has got to be a big focus for this defensive crew and the coaches, is conditioning through this offseason. Making sure these guys are healthy, making sure they're playing smart football and not putting themselves in positions that they could suffer an injury. Yeah,
I know for me, later in the podcast, I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers because I have some concerns, obviously, with the team, but we'll get through. When it comes to the cornerback market, there wasn't really any massive guy that was able to get there, but go ahead.
Yeah, before we move on from linebackers, there was one other big name linebacker.
Bobby Wagner.
Yeah, and he didn't get a lot. That I think was a great signing for the Washington Commanders. You didn't have to pay him a lot. You got him on a 1-year deal, and you got a veteran, intelligent, great linebacker to throw into your defense and teach some of this youth. This is a great signing for the Commanders, in my opinion, for very little money, no commitment essentially, and he's going to be able to go in there and help this defense learn some of the tricks and traits that you need to go from college to the NFL. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Commanders go after one of the top linebackers in the draft here to put in there behind Bobby Wagner and really learn and be like, hey, learn everything you can from this guy. Be a sponge.
Yeah, I think that's a great move. The 1 year, $8.5 million deal. It's pretty much like they're not really looking for Bobby Wagner, the player. They're essentially signing him $8.5 million to be a coach on the field and go, listen, like this, and that. Coach. Yeah. Good move. But again, it's one of those things where I go, you're not going to get the production out of Bobby Wagner that you once did. It's just solely going to be the coaching aspect.
It is, and I mean that this Commanders team, it's new ownership, it's new management, it's
New coach.
coaching, it's new quarter.
It's going to be everything. I agree.
Exactly.
It's good to have
So
those
it's not
guys.
like the Commanders are going to come into this season going, yeah, we're going to win the NFC East. We're going to, go to the Super Bowl. It's none of this for Washington. This is a key building year for them, and that is a cornerstone on defense to build that youth with. Because he's one of the best player coaches available. And if we didn't get Patrick Queen, that was another guy on my list that I was really looking for Pittsburgh to bring in to help the youth that we were likely to draft.
Yeah, I agree with you. Moving forward to the corners, there's a handful of guys that signed. Nothing that really ticks the needle for me in this department. You're looking at a lot of guys of going like the top 5 guys. The youngest is 27, or they're going to be 27 once the season starts. The oldest being 29 when the season, or pardon me, 31 when the season starts, with Darius Williams going from Jacksonville to the Rams. But yeah, it's just a lot of guys that hit the open market where it's maybe they're a little bit past their prime, but they're going to be serviceable enough to, be a number 2 or number 3 on the team. You're not seeing that massive signing of like, oh my God, this guy was available, and it's just great value.
I mean, none of those were really available.
No, none of them were.
But this was another position where the Tennessee Titans sort of made their splash and was like, yeah, we're going to take Chidobe Awuzie, and 3 years, $36 million, get a nice cornerstone piece in that cornerback spot. So,
well, they lost Sean Bunting, so
Yeah.
that was one of the guys that they needed to go out and replace him with, and they get an established guy who's played with Cincinnati for the last couple of years and been one of Cincinnati's best corners.
Yeah, and so that was a good addition for the Titans for sure. As we talked about, they really needed to go out spending this year and bring in some pieces as they build.
But yeah, no real major stuff there. But looking at the safeties, there was a bunch of stuff happening there. Xavier McKinney, the 24-year-old, going to be 25 once the season starts, goes from the Giants, signs with the Packers. Really don't like this move because he's a fucking great player. Signs 4 years, $67 million. He's going to be a phenomenal player there. Darnell Savage goes from Green Bay to Jacksonville. He was the next biggest signing, $21 million over 3 years.
I mean, McKinney really was the only one that got paid. We saw the safety position this year. It kind of took a hit. A lot of teams released their safeties leading into free agency, and we didn't think many of them were going to get paid, and I think we were right in that.
The safety position has really turned into the running back position of the defensive, because you can just really plug and play guys into that spot, and if you have a already established secondary, then it makes it a hell of a lot easier. And even if you don't necessarily have that established secondary, plugging in a guy like a Geno Stone, which I thought was amazing value for Cincinnati to pick up at the 2 years, $14 million. You're sitting back going like, that dude should have been making Darnell Savage level money, maybe even more than that, maybe kind of like that halfway mark between McKinney, because in that Baltimore defense, he was phenomenal.
Oh, I know, and it's just it's the safety position is sort of becoming, you need to be a guy who can essentially play center field, and then if you're the next safety on the list, you need to be able to play both, deep and slot. That's the thing. A lot of nickel and dime defenses out there, and so I did like what your Chicago Bears did, because you also released a couple of guys, and then you brought in Kevin Byard. 2 years, $15 million, that's good. And I really like the addition of Jonathan Owens as well, coming from the Packers to the Bears. And so you've got that NFC North rivalry going on, and you got him cheap too. 2 years, $4.5 million. Like, that's less than $3 million a year. That's a great signing as well for a rotational guy in your defense.
The other thing with that is that with the Jonathan Owens signing, is that Chicago now has a superstar wife coming to the city with Simone Bynes, who is one of the most famous female athletes in the world, one of the most famous athletes around the world. And so people are like, we got our Taylor Swift now. And I'm like, like,
Well,
I wouldn't.
I did enjoy her comment too of, oh, thank God I don't have to wear Packers gear anymore, because she is a Bears fan.
Yeah,
And so
she
for her,
likes
she's
Chicago.
like, oh,
She
exactly.
and I like the
Now
other
I can-
tweet.
I don't have to wear this garbage anymore, this green and yellow.
I like the tweet of going, thank God I don't have to take a connecting flight to go watch my husband play. I was like, yeah. She's happy. She's
100%.
she might have been looking at that going like, hey, if Chicago calls you, take the fucking deal.
Damn right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another move I like is Cameron Curl, the former Washington Commanders safety, signing with the Rams, and they got him 2 years, or essentially just a little under $9 million. I love that deal for Curl because he is a phenomenal player. He plays more of that strong safety role, so he's a little bit more of kind of like the linebacker deep in coverage, but great deal for the Rams, man.
Yeah, no, there were a lot of good safeties out there, and there's still a lot of good safeties available at this point as well that just haven't signed deals. I think because they're still adjusting to the fact that they're not going to make as much as their previous contracts were, because this position is not as valued as it was 10 years ago when you had guys like Troy Polamalu playing and Ed Reed and guys like that, like you just not that big banger position where you're the quarterback of the defense. It's not that way anymore.
And it's, to me, I look at the safety spots, and the two biggest guys that I really look at are Justin Simmons and Eddie Jackson. Both 30 years old, both, not necessarily playing to that level they once did. Jamal Adams, I don't think is going to sign anywhere. I think he's probably done just due to injuries if he hasn't already retired. But yeah, for me, Justin Simmons, Eddie Jackson are really that true center fieldman type role. Justin Simmons, hell of a lot better of a tackler than Eddie Jackson.
Yeah.
But if you just say to Eddie Jackson, your job is to just sit in center field and go try to pick the ball off, he's going to be money with that. I think one of the biggest mistakes that the Bears made with Eddie Jackson's is trying to bring him into the box a little bit more often, and then they drafted Jaquan Brisker, and it was like, all right, Eddie, do whatever the fuck you want in center field. You don't have to worry about tackling.
Yeah, 100%. That was a mistake that the Bears made, and they were also overpaying him a little bit, and so it made sense to see him. I'm not really sure where he's going to land, but Justin Simmons, I think there's a lot of options out there for him, a lot of places he could go. It depends how much he really ultimately decides he wants to make. He's another one that I've looked at for Pittsburgh because he is really good at playing both that deep zone and coming up and playing a little bit of that slot. Being such a good tackler, he is great in the run game. And I think he would be a really good complement to Fitzpatrick, allowing Fitzpatrick to just hang back and play center field while Simmons comes up and makes sure to be extra protection in that run game. The Commanders as well. The Washington Commanders would be really smart to add him in there to be able to play back behind Bobby Wagner, be another veteran presence to help teach these young guys. That tandem in Bobby Wagner and Justin Simmons to bring up this young Washington defense would be a great addition.
I think so as well.
They have
and
the money to be able to pay him that money that he's worth, and so he could get that longer term, maybe a 2 or 3 year deal, making that little bit more, that 12 to 15 maybe, where I think most teams are going to look at him and go, we're not giving you more than 9, maybe 10 if it's on a 1 year deal.
I even think more than $8 million a season for those types of guys, you're probably pushing it, because again, that safety market, teams are looking at it going, man, I can draft a guy in the 5th round and get Hufaga, who was just turned into one of the best safeties in the league, and just kind of do plug and play and do that, and he's going to be cheap. Or I can go out and sign a younger guy, because just looking at the free agent market that's still available, taking a look at some younger cheap guys, Mike Edwards, you also have You know, guys like Ryan Neal could be an option. Adrian Amos, not necessarily a younger guy, but still available. Terrell Edmonds, you know, brother of Tremaine Edmonds, you know, former
Hmm.
Pittsburgh Steeler. There is guys, you know, Terrell Burgess, Kayvon Wallace. There's players that you can plug and play, and if, for instance, that's all you're missing, is that kind
Yeah.
of free safety, just kind of center fielder. You can plug in a guy and just go, okay, you're not necessarily going to be the best guy that we have, but you're going to be serviceable.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
So I know that I talked a bunch of guys that I still think any free agents that you're potentially looking at as key guys to potentially get signed somewhere.
I mean, we touched on the three key guys that I was looking at because, as I said, my focus has shifted a little bit to, you know, is everybody going to land, to more where and who could the Pittsburgh Steelers potentially land.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, for myself, I was looking at Tyler Boyd, Chase Young, and Justin Simmons. You know, and I've mentioned other teams that these guys could all land with as well. But those three guys are key additions that I'm looking at for the Steelers to make because they all could be brought in at a lower cost than what they were making previously, and could be good fits depth wise for this Steelers team. There's outside of that center and right tackle now, we're only looking really at depth. You know, we traded away Deontay Johnson, you know, to the Panthers and got back Dante Jackson, which really solidifies our cornerback spot. I know there have been some tweets and some mentions from Patrick Peterson saying he really would like to come back to Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh didn't want to pay him what he was going to be making. So for him, he's going to have to look at it and, you know, sort of do that Bobby Wagner thing and be like, yeah, we'll sign you for a really cheap 1-year deal, but you're not going to be playing every down. You know, a lot of teams noticed that Patrick Peterson has lost a step last year, and they were targeting him in a lot of those games, and he was getting beat a lot. And so he'll really be in there to be a slot cornerback, you know,
Coach of
be
the
that third
defense.
guy. Exactly. And I would like to see that happen. That would be great. He really wants to come in and be able to help Joey Porter Jr. learn and grow. And so I'd have no problem with them bringing someone like that in. But with Deontay Johnson leaving, that leaves us with George Pickens, and then Calvin Austin is sort of our number 2 spot, which I don't dislike. Calvin Austin, I think, will be a great number 3 slot wide receiver, but Tyler Boyd, he's a Pittsburgh boy. You know, he's always expressed an interest in playing in Pittsburgh. He was drafted by the Bengals, so he's had to play against Pittsburgh twice a year, every year his whole career. And he's been a consistent receiver, you know, getting that 600 to 900 yards a game or a season for the last, I think, 6 years or so. And he has had 2 seasons where he eclipsed that 1,000-yard mark. And so I think he would be a great addition to the Steelers team if he wants to come here and close out his career, because he's always said he wants to play here. He would definitely be a number 2 guy, depending on who we draft as well, because the Steelers will always draft a wide receiver come draft time. I've not seen a season go by where they don't. And so if they draft somebody and he comes in and shines, then he will likely take that number 2 role away from Tyler Boyd, and Boyd will slip to that number 3. Calvin Austin is still primarily going to be a return guy, I feel, with that great speed. He's a little bit smaller, but he showed flashes last year, so I would not be upset to see him as our number 3. Other places I could see Boyd landing, though, are the Arizona Cardinals. You know, if he wants to be a number 1 somewhere, the Cardinals lost a lot. You know, Marquise Brown is gone. They traded away
Rondell Moore
for Desmond Ridder, and so they're lacking at that wide receiver position now. And so I could see him potentially landing somewhere like Arizona, and then having to compete with whichever rookies they draft to fill that role. Another one would be the LA Chargers. You know, the Chargers are in need of wide receivers right now. Lost Mike Williams, they've lost Keenan Allen. You know, they got some youth there, but they could use a veteran presence, and Tyler Boyd would be a good fit for that they could get relatively cheap. A hell of a lot cheaper than both Williams and Allen were made. And
Yeah.
so you need to get something that Justin Herbert can throw the ball to still, and I think Tyler Boyd would be a good.
Yeah, so now moving over to the conversation of potential trades that have already happened. But yeah, I agree, some good value there for Tyler Boyd. But talking about the trades that have happened this offseason, it feels like we've had more trades this offseason than what we've normally seen. And a lot of interesting moves because the first one that I want to talk about directly goes with your Pittsburgh Steelers here, and they made two trades that are currently on my list of things that we're going to want to talk about, but sending Kenny Pickett and a fourth-round pick in 2024 to the Philadelphia Eagles for a 2023 third and two 2025 seventh-round picks for Kenny Pickett. And, yeah, obviously they signed Russell Wilson this offseason, and man, in one of the conversations I'm going to have a little bit later about the Steelers, but it just feels like Kenny Pickett, man, like he was just immediately like, no, Russell Wilson came in, fuck all of you, I'm leaving, trade me. And yeah.
Yeah, I think he shot himself in the foot because, leading up to this, he was very receptive to a veteran coming in and competing for that number one role. And all within a couple hours, it surprised a lot of people, I think. Within a few hours of the official signing of Russell Wilson, Russ said he texted Kenny Pickett and he's like, let's go. Let's
get to work.
Put our best selves on the field. Let's improve. Let's get this team better and do our best every game. And Kenny Pickett just didn't seem to receive that well. I think he felt like he wasn't going to have an opportunity to compete for that number one job with Russell Wilson. And that, to me, showed weakness. Like, you're going in there and you're going, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to compete with Russell Wilson. Well, if you can't compete with a, 34-year-old, former Pro Bowler, then why do we want you here? And this is the first time the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to enter a new season with completely new quarterbacks since 1967. They have never had all of their quarterbacks just let them all go at the end of the year because they just didn't work out in like almost 60 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. Because we saw it, Kenny Pickett with that trade the other day. He was the last one still standing. Mason Rudolph signed with the Tennessee Titans. Mitchell Trubisky, the Bills heard that he was released and they just cut everybody from their defense so they could sign him back to a 2-year deal. I know that's not why they did it, but
I know.
Right? I found that so funny how quickly they signed him, and it's like, okay, calm down, guys. It's just Mitch the bitch.
It's Mitch kissing titties Trubisky, like.
Right.
Yeah. That was a shocking move to me because I looked at that and went, if Josh Allen goes down, you don't want Trubisky in as quarterback because he's not
even
good.
The number 2.
Yeah.
Kyle Allen is still the number 2 on that team.
Jesus.
Which, I mean, says a lot when you're like, yeah, Kyle Allen, not Mitch.
Yeah, pretty much.
But, going back to that Kenny Pickett, like, I like the value. It's unfortunate that for the Steelers, we have to look at this, and that was a first-round pick bust.
Yeah.
But you know what? Every team in this league has busts in the first round. You can attest to that. Even I can. Devin Bush was a bust for us as well. It happens far more often than you find a superstar generational talent in the first round. It does happen. And so...
Especially when you get into those mid-20 picks.
Exactly. It's tough, and that was a situation in that year where Big Ben had retired. We needed a quarterback, and Kenny Pickett was there at our pick. We had to take him. It was simple as that, and it hasn't worked out. Do I think he kind of got the short end of the stick? Yes. He was with an offensive coordinator that was not good. Matt Canada, I think, mishandled the talent that was there and the opportunity given to him, and ultimately it ended Kenny Pickett's opportunities, and it ended his tenure with the Steelers because of that big chip on his shoulder and that unwillingness to compete for the starting role, you haven't proven that you're the starter in this league. And so now he's going to go to a Philadelphia Eagles team where
He's going to be a backup.
Not gonna be the starter. Like, you're not even going to compete for the number one role. You know, like with Russell Wilson, with how little we paid him, if Kenny Pickett had come into training camp absolutely balled out, and then preseason he looked phenomenal, like he looked like he had taken leaps and bounds forward, I think the Steelers would have looked at that and gone, it's only 1.2 million. Sorry, Russ. Like, we're gonna ride with this young guy we drafted. You know, you can go find somewhere else to play. And I really think the Steelers would have done that. But now, Kenny Pickett made his decision, and the Steelers are firmly going to be going with Russell Wilson going forward, and whoever we draft or bring in.
Yeah, this entire move felt to me that Kenny Pickett was completely running away from a fight. He did not want to compete from it. Or because we saw earlier, or at the end of the season, where Pittsburgh said, hey, we're going to ride the hand of Mason Rudolph into the end of the year. You're going to be the backup. And he said, no, I'm just not going to dress.
No.
It's one of those things where, again, you have a guy who was, granted, he was dealt a shitty hand with Matt Canada. But even when he was out there, he didn't look like he was playing that great anyway. So it's like, you can talk about being dealt a shitty hand and how you're going to deal with that. Kenny Pickett did not deal with it in any of the right ways. Justin Fields, he was dealt what could possibly be said as the worst hand ever dealt to a first-round quarterback in the NFL. And he's dealt with it with class, dignity, and he's shown enough to try to do this, and that, to the point where people don't want to see him go. And it's like, well, he's going to, unfortunately. But yeah, I think the fact that they got a third-round pick and they, moved up in the draft, they got 2 7s, which are essentially just like, take these, we don't want these anymore. That could be something interesting. You could get your new fullback of the future in the 7th round. Just kind of...
I mean, that also, it's 7th rounders. Those we often see get packaged in deals just to sweeten that pot a little bit. And so I could definitely see the Steelers utilizing those this year, next year, just to move up around.
Exactly.
Like that.
7th round picks are like, you look at a player on another roster that is going to get cut, and you're like, you know what, we'll give you a 7th round pick for him just because we want to guarantee that we get this particular guy.
Cool. I mean, look at Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon is a great running back, and
he got traded for a 7th round pick.
Him away for a 7th. Like, you can get good talent for a 7th round pick.
Without a doubt.
And the fact that the Steelers were able to swap Kenny Pickett, get him out if he was going to be a problem in the locker room, only give up a 4th round pick to move up into that 3rd round, and essentially move up almost 40 picks. I think it was 32 picks they moved ahead, and that is a substantial amount to move up in the draft, especially in those middle rounds where you can get a talent that is vastly better than what you would have gotten in the 4th.
Yeah, and that is not the only trade that we saw the Pittsburgh Steelers make this particular week. We saw them trade Deontay Johnson to the Panthers and a 7th round pick for Dante Jackson, the cornerback, and a 6. So it's essentially, we're going to give you a wide receiver, we're going to move up around, and we're going to get a corner who we really need. I think that's great value for both teams. Both teams looked at this and went, you know what, the Steelers were getting a number 2 corner. Jackson didn't have the production that you would have wanted to see from last year. Been a guy that's consistent with interceptions, had none last year. But
well, we got to remember he was on a Panthers team that was often playing deep in the hole.
Oh,
and so a lot
yeah.
of these teams, once they got so far up, it turned into
a running battle. No, totally. But him and Joey Porter Jr., that's going to be a solid secondary for the Steelers. Really like that move. And again, just moving up in the draft. Again, you got a 6th round pick instead of a 7th. It's good move. Like it all around. And you get rid of a guy who, frankly, in Deontay Johnson, he was kind of the latest and greatest of the Steelers' wide receiver problems, where he's a productive guy, but just maybe has a little bit too much of that ego in him. And, again, the touchdowns weren't there this year.
No. No, his production just wasn't quite where they wanted it to be for how much he was being paid.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they were looking at it, and we needed to get some money off the books to be able to sign guys like Patrick Queen,
Yes.
to be able to bring in guys like a Dante Jackson or whoever else we sign. And so that was a key move for them to move him on, and sort of say to George Pickens, look, you are our number one guy now.
Yeah.
And so here you go. We asked you to back up Johnson, be the number 2 for a while. Let's see what we can do. It hasn't worked out. We're going to get some money in some extra cap space. You're our number 1. Let's go.
Yeah.
And so ultimately that was a great move for both teams, as you said, because the Panthers really needed some weapons for Bryce Young, and Deontay Johnson could bring that to them.
Mm-hmm. I'm quickly going to run through a couple of trades here. For quarterbacks, Mac Jones was traded from the Patriots to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a 2024 sixth-round pick to be the backup to Trevor Lawrence. Sam Howell, the Commanders quarterback this year, who's going into year number 3, was traded alongside with a 2024 fourth and sixth to the Seahawks, who gave up a 2024 third and fifth. I love that move for Seattle.
Me too.
Getting a third or getting a fourth, or essentially just moving back around and getting a young, talented quarterback who could easily be the replacement for Geno Smith. I love that. Essentially we're not losing picks in this draft. We're just moving back, and we're getting a very capable starting quarterback. And,
exactly.
For the Commanders, they get a third and a fifth. They move up.
Yep. And it's smart for the Commanders, too, because, everybody knows they're taking a quarterback.
Yep.
And so now you don't have that quarterback controversy in Washington. We know who their starter will be. We know Marcus Mariota will be the backup for them. And Sam Howell can now go to a situation in Seattle where he's like, okay, I might not play this year, but I'm going to get to learn this new system in Seattle. Let Geno Smith do his thing. I don't know if Geno Smith even has another contract coming next year. I think he's nearing the end of his career at this point. And then Sam Howell can step in and take over a team with a phenomenal, talented offense and a quickly growing defense that's
only going to get better under Mike
the
McDonald.
Seahawks team is going to get better over the next few years. We're starting to see the fruits of that trade with the Broncos to send Russell Wilson away and all the pieces they got back. It's now starting to come together for Seattle. At first it was like, oh man, both these teams lost out. Now we're seeing it really start to work out for them.
Yeah. The next trade that I want to talk to happened recently, and that was the Chicago Bears sending a fourth-round pick for Keenan Allen. Wow. All I can say is that the Bears now have one of the best wide receiving duos in the NFL with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. Right there, doesn't matter who's playing quarterback, whether it's Justin Fields or Caleb Williams.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be looking at this going, we have a safety blanket in Keenan Allen who is just able to get open and be productive. And then you have the superstar talent in DJ Moore. Then you add in DeAndre Swift, who is incredibly shifty, Gerald Everett and Cole Kmet from the tight end position, an offensive line that looks pretty solid. You just look at this and go, this might be the best offense the Chicago Bears have put onto the field maybe in my lifetime, especially if it's Caleb Williams.
Right? It is really good. And this also allows you guys with that 9th pick, I believe you have, or...
Yep.
You look at that, initially there was a lot of thoughts of, it has to be Romeo Odunze or something like
Malik
that. It needs to be a
Neighbors.
wide receiver. Now they can look at that and go, okay, well, do we take a defensive player here, or do we even trade back and get some more draft capital and take a defensive player later? We don't need to take a top 10 wide receiver now, because that could almost hinder it and create some conflict in number of touches at that point then.
Well, for me, I look at that move and I go, sorry, continue.
No, go for it.
For me, I look at this move, I go, if the Bears want to sit back and let's say Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors is still there at 9, why not take one of them? Why not just have Caleb Williams walk into DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and let's just say Malik Neighbors for poops and giggles?
Yep.
What number 1 pick has ever walked into a situation like that? I'm sorry.
Oh, none.
No one.
My only concern there is, like I said, you get a guy like a Malik Neighbors there, and then by week 6 or something, Keenan Allen's not getting the touches he thought, or DJ Moore's not getting as many because you're spreading the ball around too much, and then you start to get that conflict in the locker room. That's
True.
what you want to try and avoid.
Yep.
Like I would say, if Brock Bowers is still there at 9, then you definitely take Bowers. And if not,
I think Brock Bowers is still going to be there at 9.
And I think that would be the better option is you bring Bowers in at tight end, and then you've got Bowers, Kmet, Keenan Allen, DJ
Jared
Moore.
Everett. Because you can't forget
Exactly.
Jared Everett is still a phenomenal tight end.
He is, and that gives you that 3 tight end set that you can then run with your running game as well. Allows for more play action and more diversity. I think that would be the better option than a wide receiver, since we do still have some wide receivers available that would be really solid, really good number 3 options, and you could get them relatively cheap, which you guys don't even need to get them relatively cheap, because even with Keenan Allen's $23 million contract on the books, you guys still have a lot of cap space.
Yeah. Well, I think what this move ultimately signals for Chicago Bears fans is they go, we don't care who's in the position to play quarterback for us next year. Whether it's Fields, whether it's Caleb, whether it's fucking Bo Nix. We are setting them up for success immediately. And when it comes to the 9th overall pick, what I think that signals to us is I think Ryan Poles doesn't believe Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors is going to be there at 9. And he thinks all 3 of the top 3 guys are going to be away. I don't think he wants to go Brock Bowers at pick number 9. I would still love the Bears to pick up Brock Bowers, but they can look at that and go, okay, well, who's to say that the Denver Broncos don't want to trade up to pick number 9? Or another team, they look at a player and they go, we want to jump the Jets to get the top tackle still available. And the Bears say, hey, we're open to business. The Bears right now only have 4 picks entering the draft. Granted, after round 4, the draft really starts to fall off, and so you're kind of okay with only having, the top picks in the first 4 rounds, but you still want to have more bites at the apple. And if they can, get an additional 2nd round pick, or maybe a 2nd and a 3rd from a team to move back, so you get, you just do a swap of ones again, a 2nd and a 3rd type situation, that opens up another wide receiver still there, or you get the best defensive player still available, or you go out there and get a Jackson Powers Johnson to be your top center prospect and really say our offensive line is going to be that. And this opens up so many possibilities for the Chicago Bears. It is so damn exciting. And the best part about this move is they gave up a 4th round pick for Keenan Allen. Yes, he's 31 years old. I don't know. I watched last year, and it didn't seem like that slowed him down.
Oh, no. We knew a trade like this was going to come, because the Chargers had to get Keenan Allen off the books. They were way over the cap. They needed to make this room. And so we knew they were going to have to sell Keenan Allen off for much less than he's worth. And so I think the Bears were just the best option, and probably
they gave the best deal, because there was the Jets and the Texans that were also offering conch stuff.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you look at the other teams that had the cap space that could bring him in, and outside of the Texans, not many of them really were in a position where they're like, Keenan Allen will be a difference maker that could get us to the playoffs.
Yeah.
The Bears really were that team where they were like, yeah, this will be a great addition that pushes us from 7 wins to 10. You know, something like that.
This is one of those moves where it takes the Bears from being a team that most people expect to be a playoff contender next year to a dangerous playoff contender next year, where you're going, let's say Caleb Williams is everything that we thought he is, and he is that guy. There is no reason that this team can't go to an NFC championship game in year number 1.
Yep.
But
100%, man. And yeah, I really do expect Poles to trade out of that 9 spot now, and it's going to be interesting to see who takes it, because as you mentioned, the Broncos, they're going to be in need of a quarterback. The Vikings are going to be in need of a quarterback. I could see Pittsburgh possibly floating an offer that way, maybe something packaged with Justin Fields, you know,
yeah,
just to move up to that 9, because as you mentioned, you know, Jackson Powers-Johnson, that is a big position of need for Pittsburgh, and I could see them wanting to get him at that 20 spot, but not sure if he'll still be there, whereas moving up to 9, you're definitely getting him.
Yep.
At
It would
9.
be a hell of a reach for Jackson
It
Powers
would.
Johnson, but you get the guy that you want.
Well, it's, I mean, there's not much still available in free agent.
Yes.
And so you need a center going in, like, you need somebody to snap the ball to Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
You know, the only other talks I've really seen is maybe making a move with Denver to bring their center over just for the familiarity. But what is Denver going to ask you to give
Well,
up?
Lloyd Cushenberry isn't available now because he went and signed with Tennessee.
Oh, is that who that was? Okay,
Yeah,
fair enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we had pretty much 2 more trades that happened. The big one, which was yesterday morning, or was it this morning that we saw the Texans, or it was yesterday morning where we saw the Texans trade with the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings get the Texans' 23rd overall pick, which came from the Cleveland deal. And they got a 7th round pick for this year in 2024, while the Texans get a 2nd and a 6th this year and a 2nd in 2025. Pretty much what this move signals is that the Vikings are loading up an additional 1st round pick to move up in the draft to get a quarterback. That is 100% what this is. They know that they're going to have to trade, and they didn't necessarily have the amount of ammo that a certain team might want. And so they said, you know what, we need to get that extra 1st. We're going to give 2 seconds. So this feels kind of like what the Buffalo Bills did a couple years ago when they traded a bunch of 2nd round picks to gain an additional 1st to move up. Very similar type move there. And the final trade that happened the first day of free agency was the Panthers trading Brian Burns away to the Giants. The Giants got Brian Burns and a 2024 5th, while the Panthers got a 2024 2nd and 5th and a conditional 2025 5th round pick for Brian Burns.
Yeah. Yeah, they, as the Panthers do, they fumbled the ball. I mean, they've traded away so many guys in the last 3 years, and they've gotten 1st round picks for none of them.
Yep.
You know, even Christian McCaffrey. They're not good at trading their players away and getting a return on it. It is... They got to do something in Carolina, man.
Yeah.
They need a change in ownership, a change in management, because they are not making good moves, not making good deals. The Giants, however, that defense this year is going to be scary to play against.
Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Brian Burns. Whoo!
Yep.
Damn, boy. Look the fuck out.
Yep. Protect that ACL there, Dak Prescott. Jalen Hurts. Maybe Kenny Pickett will get to start.
Maybe,
Right.
maybe. But speaking of your Pittsburgh Steelers, this was one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about today, and kind of looking at this Pittsburgh Steelers team, because frankly, I don't really know the direction of what the Steelers are doing at this point, because obviously Kenny Pickett, we heard all offseason pretty much until the Russell Wilson, we're building around Kenny Pickett, this is Kenny Pickett's team, this and that, and then it was, oh hey, by the way guys, we signed Russell Wilson, which did not come as a shock, but then you looked at that one, okay, it's going to be Russell Wilson and Kenny Pickett.
Yep.
Trade away Kenny Pickett, you're now sitting back going, we know that Russell Wilson isn't going to be the answer in Pittsburgh. He might
Not.
He's not the answer, because
No,
he's
not long term.
no. And looking at this move, I went, okay, like he's gonna be what he is. I don't know what level Russell Wilson is going to be able to play at, but the move where they traded away Deontay Johnson, you sit back and go, okay, what is their offense going to be? Because you talk about who's your top guy again? George Pickens. He's a phenomenal looking receiver. We've seen him make highlight plays, and he does a great job. Can he take that step and be that number one wide receiver? We don't know. And then you trade away Deontay Johnson. Calvin Austin, I look at him as a Duvernay type player, of where he's a return specialist that can play wide receiver, but he's not going to be high up into that order. And, you brought in Van Jefferson. Realistically, the best he's going to be is your number 3. And yeah, if
did
you
they
do...
end up signing Van Jefferson?
I thought they did.
Did they? Okay. I know I had been seeing whispers of it, but I hadn't seen anything official come down yet.
Yeah, I'm just gonna take a look here. Van Jefferson. Oh, he did sign with Pittsburgh on a 1-year deal. The actual contract hasn't officially come out yet, but I can't imagine that it's going to be all that high. But I don't look at Van Jefferson as anything more than a third. Even if they do sign Tyler Boyd, that's one of those things. You got a maybe number 1 with 2 guys that are both number 3 wide receivers. The defense is going to be stellar. They're going to be stellar. The problem is it's going to be your offense again. And I think we're going to see the exact same problems that we saw from this Pittsburgh Steelers team last year. Maybe not necessarily in terms of like the actual offensive play calls, where you're looking at your offensive coordinator going like, what the hell are you doing? Would someone take the crayons away from him because he's eating more than he's actually drawing with? I genuinely worry about this Steelers team, because they could be a team where they get to the playoffs, they might win a playoff game, but then what are they going to do next year?
Well, honestly, that is kind of the goal for this year. It's strange because I've had people coming up to me this week, Giants fans, Commanders fans, people like that, and they're all like, man, your Steelers are putting together a Super Bowl team. And I have to go, whoa, no, we're not. Not quite. Sure, there's maybe potential for a good team, but I really feel like they're putting together a team that they're trying to break this drought of playoff losses. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like they're, this team definitely at this point looks like it's good enough to make the playoffs.
Without a doubt.
And looks like they could for sure win a wild card game. And that is, I think, the end goal right now for this team. Because of what we have in place, because of what we could potentially get, like, we don't have anything that we could offer to trade up and improve a position, like a quarterback, well enough to push us to that Super Bowl caliber. That's the spot where we're at. I look at the Russell Wilson signing and I go, you know what? A former Pro Bowler, a former Super Bowl champion, he is honestly, he is the best bridge quarterback option you can get for $1.2 million. Like, you can't pass that up. And he's going to be an improvement. You look at last year's stats. He had more passing yards than all of the Steelers quarterbacks combined.
Yes.
By more than 500. He had more touchdowns than all of the Steelers quarterbacks combined. He had more touchdowns last season than Kenny Pickett has had in his entire career.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an improvement. And you look at the offense and you go, well, yeah, sort of George Pickens and it's Pat Freiermuth. People are forgetting about Najee Harris and Jalen Warren and the things that Arthur Smith did in Tennessee the last time he was an offensive coordinator. They didn't have a whole lot of offensive weapons there either. It was Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think they had maybe one wide receiver. I can't even remember who. And
Julio.
Derrick Henry.
Oh, wait,
and
no,
what they
not
did was they went to an AFC championship, I do believe, with Derrick Henry. He broke 2,000 yards one year, almost broke it a second year. Ryan Fitzpatrick had his best statistical year. It's shaping up to be that same sort of thing where I expect to see a lot of run game, relying heavily on the defense, and George Pickens is either going to have to show those flashes you know, or maybe Pat Fryermuth balls out and is, you know, a top 3 tight end next year. Like, there are options there. I don't expect this offense to be the most explosive in the year in the league, but I think they're going to be greatly improved over what they've been the last 2 years.
I agree. I think this offense will be better next year than what we saw over the past couple of years. Russell Wilson is without a doubt
Yeah.
an improvement. And like I said, I think this is probably an 11-win team just due to the defense. Do I think they can win a wild card game? Hell yes. Do I think they can win a divisional game? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the exact reason of why I'm questioning what the Steelers are doing right now, because I think it's fine to want to win a playoff game, but the ultimate goal is to win Super Bowls. And what you're saying is that, you know what, this team's not really built for a Super Bowl. But that makes the question for me a little bit more interesting of going, what are they going... And like, I'm not necessarily worried about the Steelers this year. I'm worried about the Steelers 2 years down the line of going, okay, winning a playoff game is great, it's awesome, but if you're only winning a wild card game, then you're just the Dallas Cowboys. And
see, I'm not as worried about the down the line. You know, this is a bridge year. You know, the Steelers don't like to enter full rebuild, which I understand. Like, you draft well year in, year out. We've got a lot of depth at a lot of positions. We're lacking at 1 or 2. And so I look at Russell Wilson as a bridge this year. I expect them to either make a trade with your Bears for Justin Fields and have him come in and sit behind Russell Wilson this season and then be the starter next year, or they are going to draft another quarterback this year in the first or second round and have that person sit behind Russell Wilson and be the potential starter for next year. That is what I expect there. The Steelers came into this offseason, this free agency, with only $10 million in cap space. They made some moves. They managed to grow that cap so that they could fill some of the gaps. Next year, they're currently sitting with about $138 million in cap. They do have a couple guys they're going to have to re-sign. I believe TJ Watt, maybe 1 or 2 others, Cam Hayward. But even with those re-signings, they're still going to have near $100 million, $90 million in cap space. Next year, they're going to be able to load up in the free agency window and fill those gaps even better. And so I'm not as concerned with the down the road for Pittsburgh. This is a bridge year for them. It feels like those last couple of years before we got Ben Roethlisberger. You know, the Steelers were okay. They were middle of the road. They were slowly improving. We just needed our quarterback. And that's kind of what it's starting to feel like again. It might not happen this year. It might be a couple years before you find that quarterback, because it's not easy to do in this league.
It's not. But
you know, and so I do expect that there could be some fumbles, much like we've had with Kenny Pickett here. You know, it wasn't a smooth transition from Ben to Kenny. You know, and you don't always get that. You don't get the Green Bay Packers that get to go from Favre to Rodgers to Love. It doesn't happen very often. And so if we have to go through some of those struggles and have a couple years of bridge quarterback Russell Wilson, you know, and bridge quarterback next year of somebody else that we, you know, offer a 1 or 2 year deal to, then so be it. If we can keep the core intact and continue building and drafting well to the point where all we need to do is catch the lightning in the bottle that one draft, and then boom, we're right back at the top. Like, this team, depending on how the Ravens look at the start of the year, I feel like we'll be competing for the division. The Bengals, yes, they're good. Yes, Joe Burrow's good, but he's a 50-50 player. Like, will he stay healthy the whole season, or will he go down? And the Bengals are replacing their grass with that turf that, you know, Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins both blew their Achilles on this past season. And so I fear for Joe Burrow's Achilles coming this year. I don't know if he'll survive. And so I'm not as worried about the Bengals this season unless Joe Burrow stays healthy for 17 weeks.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing is for my team, there's been so many years of just middle of the road, of where either they're not good enough to be a consistent playoff team, and they're not bad enough to get enough picks early on, or when they are bad enough during that period, they've traded away for a guys that's not really helping the cause. And I've always said I would rather see my team be bad for 3 years and purposely be bad for a couple of years to get a bunch of really good young talented guys and then build off of that. And we've seen that in Chicago the last 2 seasons. Yeah. And we're seeing the fruits of the labor now, and hopefully building that consistent team. I just look at the Steelers right now. It just feels like it's just okay with being okay. Like, okay, maybe not okay with being okay. It's more okay with being good but not great.
Yeah.
That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting with the Steelers team over these last 6 or 7 years. Because again, the last couple of years with Ben Roethlisberger, they didn't really kind of look to try to find that guy to be the replacement. But then again, it's a tough situation to really do. They would have had to trade up to go get a guy. Like, I understand that. And then the Kenny Pickett situation was an absolute mess. I just look at it right now and I go, Russell Wilson is a 1-year guy. He's the only quarterback on the team. You talked about a guy like Justin Fields, which I think the Steelers, they need to go after a guy like Justin Fields. Because him and Russ play a very similar game, and you need to make that move. Would you trade the 98th overall pick for Justin Fields, your 3rd round pick that you just received?
Yeah, that's honestly something I was saying when that trade went down with Kenny Pickett yesterday. I was like, it would not shock me at all to see Pittsburgh flip that 3rd to Chicago for Justin Fields.
Yeah,
like 100%. I fully expect that to happen, assuming Ryan Poles doesn't still believe he can get a 1st or 2nd, because he's kind of been shooting himself in the foot throughout this offseason so far and not pulling the trigger on taking some of these deals, because he's been offered some better picks than probably what he's going to end up getting now for Justin Fields, because all the other quarterbacks have already shuffled, and there's only a couple teams that are really in need of a quarterback now in the Vikings, which you're not going to trade him to a division rival, the Broncos, which don't have a whole
picks.
lot they can send back, and then the Raiders and the Steelers.
Yeah. And the trade for the Eagles even said, we tried to trade for Justin Fields, we just couldn't get a deal done for that, so then we shifted our focus to Kenny Pickett, which is frustrating to me because I looked at the Eagles and went, that's a great spot for you to go, Justin, and the Steelers. But yeah, for me, I just sit back and I go, I just don't know the direction of the Steelers, because they're going to have a Super Bowl caliber winning defense that's going to take them as far as they possibly can. They're going to be tired as hell come the end of the year, and they're not going to be able to get it done when it matters in the divisional games. I'm not talking wild card. I think they can win a wild card game. And I think they're going to be a great team this year. I really do. But for me, I just sit back and I go, what is the game plan moving forward? And that is for me the biggest thing, where I go, having this great team, great defense, and constantly building that up and having some great talent, but then you just kind of sit back and go, well, what's the direction? Because it feels like there's a ship going through some very cool, calm, clear water, but unfortunately there's no captain steering it and pointing it towards where it's going. It's just gonna go. It just kind of feels captainless at the moment.
See, and I disagree. This is Mike Tomlin's potentially last year.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what this is the management, Khan and the Rooney family are looking at it going, we don't want to build up too much right now and commit too much of what we're going to have available next year in case this year falls flat and Mike Tomlin decides to move on. We're going to have to find a new head coach, and we're going to have to go in a new direction. And if we have all these contracts on the books, then we're in really big trouble, and it's 5 to 7 years before we can start a true rebuild. Whereas if it goes badly this year, Mike Tomlin leaves, we have to go and find a new head coach. We go out and whoever it ends up being, say Ben Johnson or something, for example, and they go, okay, now we're rebuilding and we've got all this cap space. And we're going to go get a top quarterback, and we're going to completely rework this entire team around what this new coach wants to do, which would mean trading away TJ Watt, trading away Minka Fitzpatrick. And that is a possibility for sure, but I'm not as concerned because the pieces are all still there where, if we do flip a third for Justin Fields, then all of a sudden a lot of the concerns like you've got that a lot of people have, they go, oh, well, never mind.
True, but that is going to be a situation that is going to be a situation of hoping that Fields pans out, and then if he doesn't, then it's right back to square one. And but like I completely agree with you on that. Of just like it's the last year, this and that.
And the Pittsburgh Steelers went through 30 years of that, between when Terry Bradshaw retired and we finally did end up with Ben Roethlisberger. It was a few bad years, a lot of mediocre years, and some good years in there with bridge quarterbacks and bridge players that we were still competitive in whatever division we were. And that's the thing with Pittsburgh is, we don't often get top 5 picks or very rarely top 10 picks unless we're trading into that, because the mentality of this team and this ownership group is to try and win. And yeah, this team doesn't look like a Super Bowl caliber team, but we've seen that in the past where you get on a roll and you go on a run at the right time of year and you become that Super Bowl caliber team. You get the right matchups going through the playoffs and you can get there. And I look at this team, that's not outside the realm of possibility. Again, we've got a big hole at that center position. We need somebody that can consistently snap the ball to Russell Wilson. And Jackson Powers-Johnson feels like the best option right now for that. And so I really think they need to focus on that in the draft. And then fill out some of the other gaps as you go and see what we've got. I'm not sold on this being a Super Bowl team like so many fans of terrible teams that don't have Super Bowl hopes. That's why I was laughing, because it's like Giants fans and Commanders fans that are saying that to me. It's like, oh, I see. Because my team's going to be better than yours. Yes. 100%.
Yeah, you think that team that's slated to win 10 games is a Super Bowl favorite because your team can't imagine.
You're only slated to win 4.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I look at that and I go, well, pump the brakes. Like, yeah, it's going to be good. I'm not going to be nearly as frustrated this year as I was last year, I don't think. And but who knows? Like, anything can happen in the NFL. Russell Wilson could go down week 2 with an injury, and then we're like, fuck.
Yep, then you got nothing.
Right? But that's what happens in this league. As you said at the start of this show, we don't like to speculate on injuries because that's not what we want to see in this league. We don't want that to happen. And so, I look at it going forward. If Russell Wilson can put up 3,500 yards and 25 touchdowns, which is worse than the stats he did last year, that is a vast improvement for this offense with a defense that is even better looking this year than last year. And
that hopefully should stay healthy.
Well, exactly. Like we've got the rotational ability to stay healthy. Herbig looked a lot better on the edge. Even if we don't a Chase Young to be in that rotation, we've got somebody that can be.
Yeah.
And so this team could be a 10 to 12 win team that, depending on what the Ravens do, we could win this division for sure.
It's a possibility.
More so than the past 2 years. Like the past 2 years, I really thought we were going to be fighting 3rd or 4th in this division. With the Browns, we're going to be fighting it out. And every year, granted, it took some injuries for the Bengals last year for us to get there. We were still sitting in that 2nd position.
Yep.
And with a couple of bounces going our way, we could have taken that division from the Ravens. And this year, I think it's going to be an even tighter fight.
My last question for you before we get to our final short segment of the show is, you talked about that 30-year kind of gap of there was a couple of good years, there was a lot of just middle of the road years. Would you rather go through that again of 30 years of essentially that, of just being middle of the road, a couple of good years while having a couple of bad years but nothing, or would you rather look at this and go, I would rather be bad for 3 years, get the team really young, really good experience with the talent that we have, and to potentially try to build that way?
Well, the one of those last words is the key, potentially. That's just it. If you can guarantee me 3 bad years means then we are Super Bowl favorites again, yeah, sure. But you can't guarantee that. The thing is, you could be bad for those 3 years and then still end up in that 30-year cycle where you just can't quite get the right pieces.
Yep,
And
you
so
can.
for me, I would rather the Steelers stick to the tradition that they've had for the last 60 years, where it is build through the draft, build for depth, build a team, and not focus on, oh, we need a superstar to lead us. You find and you build that superstar, sure, but you don't let the egos dictate it. And like, no, I don't want to go 30 years, but I'm not willing to sacrifice 3 years of 2 or 3 wins for maybe.
I,
You know,
I
'cause
hear
it,
you. I hear you. But for me, I look at it and I go, I would rather have, let's just say it's 10 years of kind of going, of kind of doing a little bit of up and down and going through that process twice. And then like the second or third time getting it right, as opposed to just looking at this team every single year going, they're so close. It's just, and then like, I don't know. I would rather take, but
I
yeah, I just,
we're in different spots. That's the thing. It's been a lot longer for your Chicago Bears.
yeah.
You know, you haven't experienced it in your lifetime, winning a championship. I have. You know, and like that's I feel like kind of the difference. And for me, I don't think the Steelers will go another 30 years of that limping along trying to find the guy. I don't think it'll happen. It could. It could. You know, like you never know. That's the unpredictability of this league and why it's so much fun to watch.
Yes.
But if this year goes horribly, like we discussed, I fully expect the Steelers to go, okay, we're going to trade away a couple of these older guys. We're going to load up on picks. And we are looking at Arch Manning in 2 years and going, I mean, we can get ourselves up to that first overall pick. Boom, there's our quarterback.
Yep. Fair
You
enough.
know, like,
Fair enough.
And that's just it. We don't have to plan to have 3 bad years. It's if we, if we trip on a rock and, bust our head open and we only go 3 wins this year, then yeah, I fully expect them to look to shop around TJ Watt and see what we can get for him. Because we'll have a high draft pick next year. And then getting a couple firsts for TJ Watt, you then go, okay, now we're going to package and start doing like the Bears did, but we wouldn't have to have 3, 4, 5 really bad seasons to do it.
Yep.
You know
So-
what I mean? And that's what I think. I don't, I don't have a crystal ball. There's no way to really tell what's going to happen, but I would rather this team continue to put the best possible squad on the field every year and fight for the division and fight for a playoff spot and see what happens, because that we talk about it every year. Getting to the playoffs, a new season begins. Once you're in the playoffs, it doesn't always matter if you're first seed or 7th seed. You have the chance to get to the game and hoist the Lombardi Trophy. It can happen any year.
Without a doubt. But my one question to that is, when was the last time the Steelers won a playoff game?
2017.
So it's been 7 years.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
So just getting to the dance is fine.
Yeah.
But sooner or later, it's just getting to the playoffs is fine. But you have to be able to. This is why we make fun of Cowboys fans all the time of going, yeah, sure, you can get to the playoffs, you can be one of the best teams, you got to be able to win it.
Oh, 100%. I agree. It's been a rough few years for the Steelers, but you got to remember those 7 years of no playoff win, 4 of those were under Matt Canada. Those are write-offs. That was terrible coaching, terrible play calling. the other 3 years, that was a very aged Ben Roethlisberger with the team going through some turmoil of, CTE Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell thinking he was worth more than he is. And it was just, it was Mike Tomlin sort of losing control of his locker room is what happened there. I feel like he's started to get control of it back now. We'll see if that's true or not. I'm hoping. And we'll see what happens going forward. Like, it's... Like, I don't compare the Steelers to the Cowboys quite yet. It's been 30 years. It's been almost 30 years for the Cowboys at this point of this going along and struggling. And so they're going through it at the moment, and I just don't think the Steelers are quite there yet.
Yeah, and the last thing that I will say in this department is when we talk about that 30 years of just kind of limping along, I feel like the Steelers have already kind of started that process since 2017. Because, again, they had a quarterback who was aged, like you said. Then they've had 4 years of Matt Canada. I'm not going to call those write-off years. I'm not calling those write-off years because Mike Tomlin had an opportunity each of those seasons to say, this isn't good enough, we're moving on. It took till 3.5 seasons for him to finally say, fine. And it should have only taken 2. I know the Steelers don't like to fire coaches and they like to ride out those terms. That is an active decision that they're saying, instead of us moving on, we're going to try to allow it to work. Yep. That's the reason why I say I can't have those be write-off years. But
no, I get you. I mean, it's just, it's been longer than 2017. I'd say since about 2015, the Steelers have started limping. It's been a tough go. Really, since that loss to the Packers in 2012 in the Super Bowl. That was where we started to see the decline of this team. We started to see retirements happening, and the guys coming in.
You were still getting to AFC Championships games, though, so you were still putting your foot into a... Yep. Like, I look at 2017 as the last year that you won a playoff game and you really gave yourself an opportunity. That's kind of the way that I look at it.
Oh, I get you. And for you right now, it's really smooth, easy sailing, because you have a very bright future. You know what you have over the next 3 to 5 years. And so it's much easier for you to have that more optimism.
I'm not optimistic. I've seen this team fucking ruin players.
Yep.
I want Caleb Williams, and I think he's going to be a great player, but there's also that cynicism in my brain of every single team that I've seen the Chicago Bears do since I've been a kid of going, they're going to ruin it. They're going to ruin it. So that's in the back of my mind. I need to see Caleb Williams be great before I can be confident.
Where I've got more of the optimism for my team, because I've seen them time and again go out there with a team that all the analysts are like, man, they're going to finish last in their division. They're going to be bottom 5 in the league. And we still are, a top 15 team, top 20 team at the very worst, usually, and that's just it. It's those top 15 years. It's, oh, well, they were missing one piece. Oh, well, they were missing 2 pieces. And so it's just finding those guys and having them click into the mentality of Steeler football. That's all it's going to take.
Yeah. Well, the last little segment that we should talk about here is obviously the big news of Aaron Donald retiring from the NFL. First ballot Hall of Famer, not even a question, in my opinion. One of the greatest defensive players that has ever graced a football field.
Yeah,
and
huge loss for the Rams, huge loss for the league.
It is one of those things, man, where you kind of felt that he was going to retire after the Super Bowl and then stuck it out for 2 more years after that. But, man, it's going to be weird to see an Aaron Donald-less NFL, because, granted, like, he wasn't the superstar that he was, prior to getting to the Super Bowls and all that stuff. The last 2 years, he hasn't been that same. He's still been a disruptive force, but, man, it's going to be weird.
Yep. Yeah, it's those are big shoes to fill, and I don't know if we're ever going to see somebody fill that anytime soon. Because he was one of those guys where you had to triple team him to stop him from getting to your quarterback, and even then, he was still breaking those those 3 blocks and getting your guys sometimes.
There's been
Like, we
plays
talk
where you
about
saw
guys like
4 guys covering him.
exactly, like, we talk about guys like Myles Garrett and, Micah Parsons and TJ Watt, and you can usually shut them down with a double team. And so it's not the same. They're not the same kind of guy. Aaron Donald, a masterclass, and I agree. First ballot Hall of Famer, and if we could change the rules so we could get him in there next year, I think we should for somebody like that. Like, in terms of we talk about Tom Brady being the GOAT. Like, you look on the other side of the ball, and Aaron Donald very much is the greatest of all time on that defensive side.
To me, it is just crazy what he has been able to accomplish. Like, I'm just going to read off some of his stats. And mind you, he plays the defensive tackle, kind of defensive end role, but he was drafted as a defensive tackle. He 6 foot, so already undersized to be right there, less than 300 pounds. So you're looking at a defensive tackle going, man, like, he's undersized. In his rookie year, he had 9 sacks. Won defensive rookie of the year. His next year got 11. The year after that, he got 8. Then he gets 11. Then he casually just throws up 25, or he puts up 20 and a half.
Yep.
From the D tackle spot, then has 12, 13, 12, and then 2022 he had 5, and then this year he had 8. So the last 2 years have kind of been down years, but 111 sacks over his career, man. There will never be another player like him.
No, I mean, he was drafted as that D tackle, but we really saw him play the end position a lot more. He was that versatile D lineman. He could play any of those positions. But we saw once everybody saw that burst of speed he had, we saw him playing outside a lot more often because he had that ability to get around the edge. And he really revolutionized what we consider an edge rusher now. That position wasn't really something that was talked about. It was, you were a defensive end or you're an outside linebacker. And now it's, you're an edge guy or you're a cover guy. And he really revolutionized what it means to be an edge rusher. And that's why we have guys like TJ Watt and Myles Garrett in the league now, where you can be an outside linebacker or a defensive end and you're considered in the same category because you're so good at getting around that edge. And Aaron Donald, without him, we might not have seen the shift to that style of play.
Yep. The edge rusher position was kind of one of those spots where you valued interior linebackers more than you valued edge rushers, and then Aaron Donald walked out and said, hold up, everybody, hold up.
That's why he was a D tackle, because at that time it was all about up the middle. It was D tackle, middle linebacker. That was what you were building your defense around. And he really changed that to the point where teams were looking at the defensive ends and the outside linebackers and going, this is what we need to focus on. It's not so much about worrying about teams running it up the middle. It's about getting that edge pressure to try and force the quarterback to panic, because the league was going to that mobile quarterback. All the quarterbacks were starting to take that Aaron Rodgers style of play action and break outside the pocket and, run the ball, reset your feet, outside the hash marks and throw it from there. And so the edge rushers were really brought in to combat that and say, no, you stay in the pocket and you give me your best Peyton Manning impression and let's see what you can do.
The fact that he won 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards, and when he won all of those Defensive Player of the Year awards, it wasn't even a conversation. It wasn't like, oh, like, this guy might get it. It's Aaron Donald. Like, it's like, I know there's been situations of where, like, we're kind of talking about TJ Watt as being like, this is the standard, like, he has to do that, and there's some guy, but with Aaron Donald there was stuff like that too, but then it was like, we physically cannot choose another player to get this Defensive Player of the Year award, just because you can't look at this guy and go like this or that. And man, I thought it was funny when he announced his retirement, he put on it, quarterbacks rejoice. Like, the cockiness to just go, every quarterback in the NFL can breathe a sigh of relief because they know I am no longer here.
Yep.
I loved Kyler Murray's response was, "I'm so happy for you, thank God." It was so funny, his response on that, just basically saying, I don't have to deal with this guy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And he's without a doubt going to be missed. It's going to be really interesting to see who's going to be that guy. I think this automatically defaults TJ Watt as the best defensive player in the NFL right now.
You know, I feel the same way. I just wish the rest of the NFL felt that way, because I mean, right now, you look at the PFF rankings, and Myles Garrett is the #1 defensive player in the league, and TJ Watt's not even in the top 10.
They don't have him in the top 10?
I know. It's I don't know what is going on right now with the NFL, because I agree. Like, TJ Watt should be the #1. He is better in every statistical category than the other players playing the same style of football. And it's
bizarre.
Unfortunate to see. You know, it's very bizarre, but you know, his brother said it best. I don't know what more he can do to prove he's the best. You know, shy of going out and breaking every single record in the same season, which is, you know, a near impossible feat to do.
I know we talked about TJ last year as a potential defensive candidate, and we both agreed that he should have won it over Myles Garrett. But I still thought, you know, Max Crosby was the defensive player of the year last year.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I agreed. Honestly, the Myles Garrett one, it really felt like they were like, well, this guy was he a first overall pick?
He was the first overall pick.
Yeah. And so I think that's what it kind of was, is they were like, you know, we need to even this stat line with TJ Watt, because TJ Watt's running away with it, and Watt picked 29th while Garrett was picked first. You know, we need to, it felt like it was just, they wanted to help him get on more even playing field with TJ Watt.
Yeah, both picked in yes, they were both picked in the same year. TJ Watt picked number 30, Myles Garrett picked number 1, and yeah, I don't know, man. As much as it sounds like, especially in this episode, that I dislike the Steelers or I'm shitting on the Steelers. You've heard me countless times talk about the praise of the Steelers that I give, particularly TJ Watt. But yeah, it feels weird with that they.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't feel like you were shitting on the Steelers at all. You're asking the tough questions. You know, it is the Steelers are in this limbo where they are. You're correct. They're very much at risk of becoming another Dallas Cowboys or New York Giants, where it's just you talk big every year and then you aren't able to deliver. You know, and they do need to find a time to shift their focus, and I think that will come next year. They didn't have the cap space to be able to go out and get a Kirk Cousins, you know, or somebody that you can be like, okay, there's a guy that for the next 2 years can definitely lead our offense. You know, they didn't have that available cap. They have that next year.
Yeah.
You know, that's their next year. I think that's when we're going to see the Steelers reshift their focus from we want to win this division to we want to win the Lombardi Trophy. You know, and at least we're in a position where each year we can say, hey, we're going to fight for our division. You know, you look at some of the other teams in the league that, you know, they don't even ever have a chance at making the playoff.
Hi, the Bears, for a lot of years.
I'm not even necessarily referring to the Bears.
No,
you know,
I am. Like that, like everything that you said right there is exactly what the Bears have been the last 15 years.
Yeah,
where it's
I mean,
occasionally get the playoffs.
Gone even longer than that. You know, you look at the Commanders, you look at the Jets, you look at the Browns. Yeah, the Browns had one good year, but that's one good year in pretty much their entire existence.
Ever since Bill Belichick, really.
Right? And I believe Bill Belichick was during the first version of the Browns.
Yes.
Before they moved to became the Ravens, and then came back in '99. And so, like, of this current version of the Browns, they've only been successful once.
Yeah, which is insane. But I'm
Right.
ultimately gonna have to end this episode here. It's been almost
Yeah.
2.5 hours. We just kind of went on a tear there, but Sterling, as always, buddy, this was a hell of a conversation today. This
Well,
was a
there
good
was
one.
so much in free agency this week. We knew this was going to be a long episode, and going forward, everybody watching, like, we don't expect the subsequent weeks coming up to be long episodes like this. We don't expect there to be a lot of huge free agencies or huge trades happening anymore. There will still be a few. We'll still be here likely every week, maybe every 2 weeks. It sort of depends on what happens through them. And then it will build up more as we get closer to the draft again.
Yeah, but like to thank everyone for hanging out with us today. We are back on Spotify week in, week out, so if you can't check us out on the YouTubes, make sure to listen to us on Spotify, potentially Apple Music or whatever they're calling their program up here in the future as well. I just need to figure that out, but till next time, peace.